before we get into everything, obviously, Ephraim Mattos,
Mm-hmm.
welcome back to the John Ronnie Show, everybody. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
We were just talking about, I guess, the differences between expectations and reality of being in the military in general. But I wanted to get your feedback first on how you dealt with the shock and reality that you're facing life or death scenarios. Did it match how you thought it was going to feel, or was it a real smack in the face?
Yeah. So there's this. First of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate
course.
it. There's a big reality shift that happens that you don't realize is going to happen. So it's not even so much about when you join the military, you kind of, any job, anything that you do, there's this expectation in your head. Obviously, it's never, reality when you show up, and that's okay. When it comes to war itself specifically, you watch war movies, you watch Saving Private Ryan grow up, you watch Black Hawk Down, right? Like I watched Black Hawk Down 10,000 times, right? Like I could quote that movie backward and front. So you have this certain expectation of kind of what combat's going to be like. So there's a psychological thing that goes on in your head when you join the military, when you're getting ready to go to war, and you don't realize it's happening, but our human ego has this defense built up to where you just don't think it's going to happen to you. You always picture, oh, the other guy's going to get hit. Oh, if I get hit, it's just going to be like a little nick. Like you always see yourself as the hero of the movie who survives the movie. You never see yourself as the dude who's like just eating bullets, right? And you're getting hit. So your first time in combat, there's a little bit of trepidation and fear before you go into combat for your first time. But there's still this level of denial. And then it starts to get eroded away slowly but surely. So your first time in combat, you start hearing the snapping. That's what bullets sound like when they go past your head. But the snapping of bullets. And you're like, oh, okay. Like we're actually getting shot at now. You do your job, whatever. And then it progresses to a point where you see, maybe you're seeing bullet impacts. My first firefight ever, I was watching bullets like impact like around my legs. And it was like, oh, wow. Like real quick, I was like, oh, we're in this. Like this is happening. And then my second firefight, somebody gets shot. Was one of our Afghan allies. And so you're hearing like the blood curdling scream of somebody who's like just got shot 4 times in their stomach and they're, bleeding out, and you're in the middle of a firefight. And so then you start to realize like, oh, these bullets actually do hit people. And I know that sounds really dumb, but I'm telling you, like there's this psychological reality that happens. And then eventually, that gets eroded further and further down. It happens to somebody that or you feel the blast of an enemy explosion. You feel a bullet like whistle past, or not whistle, but snap past your head. And then eventually, like for me, what I ended up, actually getting hit on a mission in Iraq. And so when that happened, it's like, oh, it can happen to me. Your ego, all of these like mental defenses that you have up where you sort of think it's not going to happen to you, that just completely goes away. And that was the most, after I got shot, like for the next, like, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes was the most terrified I've ever been in my entire life. Because I've got blood pumping from 2 holes in my leg. And this facade of it's not going to happen to me, it can't happen to me, is completely gone. And you realize, man, I am but a mere mortal, and it absolutely can't happen to me, because it just did. And so now your level of like, now your level of ego is gone. And so you completely feel exposed, and you feel so mortal, and you're still in that, you're still in that environment. So yeah, that's kind of what it feels like going from civilian to like, no, dude, you could die out here.
Does this, I would assume, like immediate ego death in a way feel good when you get out of the other side, because you've kind of faced your ultimate fear that you thought would have never happened just happened to you? Do you walk a bit differently with like this numbness now, or are you still in that complete terrified state 24/7 when you're at battle?
Honestly, it's a little bit of both. I mean, and it's going to be different from guy to guy, right?
Sure.
Like the old saying, the unexamined life is not worth living. So when you go through these experiences, some guys, they come back and they really introspect on what this meant, and they really sit and think about, wow, like this is how I used to think when I was 19 years old before I'd ever been in a firefight, and now here I am a few years later experiencing all this. And then you sit and like you overanalyze, maybe not overanalyze, but you really sit and you think through it. And that's where you can have like a nice sort of lesson learned and become a little more introspective and whatnot. Other guys, they don't sit and think about they don't sit and think about that necessarily. And so they might not have the same kind of change of heart. They may become like more aggressive. They may become more cocky. They're like, man, like I freaking survived. Like I'm the dude, I'm the man. Right. And it's going to affect different guys in different ways. For me, it's like, I feel, it's so funny. So like, you know, my background is a SEAL, and then my current work, still working in conflict zones. People think like, oh, you must be an action junkie. Like you must be like all about jumping out of planes on the weekend. And you must be, you know, always like looking for a fight. Like, no, for me, like I'm very, very risk averse.
Yeah, you don't seem like you want any trouble.
No, I don't. I'm very risk averse. If I'm going to take a risk, it's going to be for a reason. It's going to be like, this is a life and death situation. I need to help someone else. Because it's like, at the end of the day, like I want to go home to my wife and my daughter. Like I want to survive. And any kind of pretense of ego of, oh, this isn't going to happen to me, like is completely gone. So for me, it affected me. I don't walk around scared all day, but I do walk around with this, I think a certain level of, I don't know if humility is the right word, but it's like an understanding that car could hit me, that, you know, this other thing could hit me. It's stuff that you might not think about when you're 19, 20 years old. You're kind of running around, you're barrel chested, you know?
Right. So you're saying even just like everyday life in the States, you walk around a little more humble, knowing that every moment could be your last.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily, you know, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. Cause so when you talk about like PTSD or, you know, whatever the different guys have, a lot of it is, you know, I like to just kind of call it combat stress, because you have this, your mind works in a certain way when you're under fire, when you're dealing with these situations. And when you come back to regular life, it's kind of hard to turn that off. And so you're kind of walking around, you're a little bit more on edge, your senses are a little more heightened. And like, so your baseline stress level is going to be a little bit elevated when it maybe necessarily shouldn't be.
Got it.
Yeah.
Right. You may not you could run the risk of getting shot at every day, but you probably see a guy walking by and you're like, that guy could have a knife and he could want to.
Absolutely.
And everyday guys or people that have never experienced that probably don't have that level of paranoia.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost like an ignorance is bliss type of thing. You may go your entire life and never have to worry about getting shot at or stabbed and whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
What drew you to becoming a Navy SEAL in the first place?
So I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My dad had served in the Air Force Reserves. He'd also been in the Coast Guard right out of high school. And so when the Iraq War happened, my father deployed. You know, he was part of air crew for the C-130 transport planes. So I grew up with an understanding of war, like that was going on. And, you know, I wanted to do my part. I wanted to serve my country. It was a very, you know, from the heart, I really wanted to serve and like go protect and help people that no one else could, or like, and I wanted to do it at the highest level that I possibly could. And for me, when I looked at, you know, all the different special operations units, they're all hard. They're all extremely difficult, to be clear. But for me, when I looked at the SEALs, I thought that one will be the most challenging for me. Because I don't swim that well. And so I was like, you know, if I'm going to do this at the highest level for myself, okay, I'm going to go figure out how to become a good swimmer. I'm going to go figure out how to do this. And that's what I did. In high school, I started like figuring out how to become a swimmer. I joined a lifeguard class, ironically, to learn how to swim properly. Like I could do a doggy paddle, but I was like, if I join this lifeguard class, I'm going to be like forced to like really learn how to swim. Yeah. So that's what I did. And it worked out. And so yeah, I was 17 years old, signed the paperwork to join the Navy. And my parents both had to be there to sign and give permission as well. Graduated high school a couple months later and went off to the military. Yeah.
Wow. So you were running gun at 18 years old saying, I'm going to be a SEAL one day.
16 years old. I knew like that's what I was going to do. 16 years old.
Did your friends acknowledge that? Like you were just kind of built a little bit differently?
Yeah, I think everybody recognized that I was serious about what I was going to do. Yeah, with the lifeguarding thing and just sort of how I started living my life was different than everybody else, and they realized like, okay, he's motivated to go do this thing. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I feel like it's almost better sometimes being that young. You have less time for people to get into your own head and change the way you think. Like your delusion, or maybe that's what people would have seen it as back in the day of like, this is what I want to do. If you let too many people get in your head and be like, you know what, I don't have to be a SEAL. Maybe I'll go do a regular job. But at 16 years old, you're hard. You're like, I'm dead set on this and this only.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to obviously get to know like a little more about the training itself of being a SEAL, like the camp. I'm going to ask you the question. It's by far the hardest to get into, correct? Based on any other.
So obviously everybody who was in different units,
because we had a SWIC guy on, and he said borderline, it was harder to get into the SWIC than
harder to get into the SWIC.
Yeah.
I have no idea who that guy was. That's not true. Like, that's not even remotely true. No, I'm like, no. Like, so I'm going to be really clear. I'm not one of these guys who's like, oh, Navy's better than Army or whatever. Like, I really, really do not care. I do not care. It's like, at the end of the day, like, are you downrange hunting bad guys? All right, we're all on the same team.
And he had complete respect for the SEALs as well.
I get it. No, it's never remotely close. So what he might have been referring to give him the benefit of the doubt, he might have been referring to there's fewer of them because there's less of the job. Okay, correct. So if that's what he meant, then yes. There might be. Look at me. Look at my alarm going off. That's all right. Unbelievable. So when you look at the initial selection course between, let's say, Rangers, Green Berets, SEALs, there's sort of like there's also the Marine Recon, MARSOC. I think they're rejiggering that or something. I'm not really sure what they're doing with that at the moment, but. Without a doubt, I think I can say objectively, I believe, without a doubt, the initial SEAL selection was without a doubt the most difficult. And the reason I can say this is because when guys fail out of SEAL training, they go become Rangers or Green Berets or whatever. And I'm not, no disrespect to those guys. I'm going to be really, really clear. Like, I love and respect those guys and they're awesome. But the flow of people doesn't go the other way. Guys aren't like, I didn't make it through Special Forces selection. I'm going to go try out the SEALs now. It doesn't work like that. It's never happened as far as I know. So, and ultimately, I think just the attrition rates and all that stuff. So again, all the Rangers and SF guys out there are going to see this and go like, no, that's not true. All right, and that, you know what, maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's I personally believe that the SEAL one is the most difficult. A lot of it has to do with the water. A lot of it has to do with the fact that you're freezing cold the whole time. So if you look at other selection courses, everybody talks about their portion of the course when they were in the cold as being the worst part, right? And that's true. But the entire SEAL selection course and it's 6 months. It's called BUDS. You're cold the entire time. You're getting hypothermia at night, and you have guys passing out from heat exhaustion during the day. So it's this mix, and you're dealing with the water, you're dealing with the ocean, which is extremely unforgiving. But I want to be clear, like the other ones are extremely tough. And then so once you're like in like the SEALs or SF or Rangers, then there's a whole other level above there that I never even attempted to do.
Really?
So there's the SEAL Team 6 guys, DevGru. There's the Delta Force guys. There's like CIA special ops teams. There's this whole other level above just like regular SEALs, Green Berets, Rangers. Yeah.
Can you explain that, like the difference between a regular SEAL and a SEAL Team? Is SEAL Team 6 just like a name, or that's an actual? I thought it was just an individual team.
Okay, so in the SEAL teams, you have the West Coast teams and the East Coast teams. So you have your regular SEAL teams, which is obviously extremely difficult to get into all that. But then what you do is you take all of the best SEALs, and of course all the SEALs will argue like those aren't the best guys, whatever. It's like it's the best SEALs. You take the best SEALs, the guys who just the best at what they do, and then they go through this other highly intensive selection process where let's say 50 regular SEALs try out for SEAL Team 6, maybe only like 25 or 20 of those guys will actually get to go to SEAL Team 6, and so they then are put into what's called a tier 1 unit. And those tier 1 units, those are the guys that you see, like those are the guys that are going after bin Laden. Those are the guys who are doing the national level, your phone beeps at home, you're on a plane 6 hours later, doing a halo jump to rescue a hostage in the middle of Africa. That's those guys. As a regular SEAL team, you train and you prepare for a deployment, but then you go and you go and deploy to a specific location for like, let's say 6 months. Right. And so during that time, you're running combat operations, you're doing anything. But when you're home for those 18 months, you're not really home. You're training and you're constantly moving around. You're not on call. I'm not gonna. No one's like at no point in my in my short SEAL career would I have like gotten a text like, hey, there's a hostage. Yeah, in Uganda, we got to go get him. That's SEAL Team 6, and so that's the difference. And then obviously you have Delta Force, which is the Army's version of that, and then SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force obviously have this great rivalry because they're like the best two units, and so they specialize into slightly different things. Yeah,
that's so interesting. Again, I always thought SEAL Team 6 was just the team that took out bin Laden. Like I understood there was a level, like a tier system, but I thought that was SEAL Team 6, and then like that was it, and then like SEAL Team 7 or whatever would come in and like do the same things.
Oh, the next. Okay,
yeah, I thought it was almost like a group. Like I was in troop group whatever, you know what I mean? I was in the graduating class of X. I didn't realize SEAL Team 6. Why the number 6? What's the
so back when SEAL Team 6 was started, so SEAL Team 6 is now the slang term for it. It's not the actual like name of the group. So back when there was one SEAL team on the East Coast and one SEAL team on the West Coast. This was back in like the 80s. I don't know my history here well enough. Maybe it was the 90s. At that point, they started the elite tier 1 unit, and they called it SEAL Team 6 simply to confuse Russian intelligence about how many SEAL teams there were.
Confused me.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like that's the whole
me.
thing. It's just meant to confuse you. Yeah,
Wow.
that was the whole thing. So now they're not called that anymore, but that's just sort of the term. And I think there's, I guess I should know that. I think there's 10 regular SEAL teams, and then there's like SEAL Team 6, I think.
Okay.
If I remember
And
correctly.
so it's like SEAL Team 6, regular SEAL teams, and then everybody else? Or that's the top tier, SEAL Team 6?
SEAL Team 6. So again, you could argue it's like, okay, is it like Delta? Is it SEAL Team 6? Is it like the CIA Special Ops teams? But like those guys,
All
like sort of that like JSOC,
Understood.
like Joint Special Operations Command dudes, like, yeah, that's like, there's nothing better in the world than those guys. Yeah.
Did you even aspire to get there? Or you selected for that, something like that?
So you can, anybody who wants to can try out for it. Like if you're a SEAL and you want to go to SEAL Team 6, you have to do at least one deployment, like so at least 2 years in the SEAL teams, and then you can try out for that. Had I stayed in the military, I definitely would have aspired to do that. I definitely would have wanted to try out. Less than 50% chance that I make it in, of course. But yeah, if I had stayed in long term, I definitely would have wanted to do that. But I knew pretty quickly that I just didn't like the military life in and of itself. Yeah, it just wasn't for me. So
What about it?
a lot of it had to do with so there's certain cultures, right? The sort of military culture really didn't I just didn't fit in the military culture, if you will. I'm not one of these people who has like a problem with authority. I do not. But if somebody's making a decision that I disagree with or I think is just kind of dumb, I really have a hard time just sort of accepting it and going like, okay. And for those high performing teams, one of the things they actually do is they encourage dissent. Amongst the team members, but then once the officer or once the leader makes a decision, everybody, you just shut up and you do your job, right? And so that's how you function, and that's good, and that's how it needs to be. For me, I definitely I feel more at home. I felt more at home as sort of a solo operator, kind of going out. And the other thing was, I really wanted to choose my missions. I wanted to choose where I was helping people. Because again, for me, it was a very like altruistic reason to join the military. I was like, dude, I want to go hunt bad guys and stop bad guys from doing bad things. And I want to help good people. And so when you're in the military, they're gonna determine where you live, who you're going to go help, whether you're going to go here, whether you're going to go there. Like, for example, my second deployment in the SEAL teams was to Southeast Asia. And we were based out of Guam, and we would go into all these different Southeast Asian countries, and we would train and work directly with the local forces. And so our job was just to do joint training. We're not doing real world operations. And I remember being really upset by that. Like, it just didn't settle with me because I'm like, dude, I just spent 18 months preparing for this deployment, and then now we're spending 6 months here just doing training with other guys. You just took 2 years of my life away, and we didn't do anything. Meanwhile, ISIS is running rampant through Iraq, and there were SEAL teams there. To be clear, there were SEAL teams there, but like I just so happened to not be in the platoon that was going there, and so then it's like I found that to be very frustrating, and that's what I mean. Like I didn't like not having control over where I wanted to go help.
Right. Were you able to speak up, or they would just tell you to kind of shut up and do your job?
Oh yeah, there's no speaking up. There's no, but there's nothing wrong with it necessarily, right? It's like
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, and to be clear, everyone else feels the same way. Yeah. We all want to go to Iraq and shoot ISIS in the face. We don't want to be in the jungle, like training. We wanted to go do the real thing. But yeah, there's no way to change that. Like if the higher level officers, like this platoon's going there, this platoon's going there, like period, done, end of story. And that's how it has to work, right? You have to maintain that order and discipline. So
Got it.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like I was like, no, I kind of would like to be able to choose what I do with my life a little more.
Major differences between the training for becoming just a regular SEAL versus SEAL Team 6?
So the initial training for becoming a SEAL is like, it's just a brutal selection course. Obviously there's all these different details of the different phases and the water stuff and everything. The best analogy is like, basically you show up and for the next 6 months, you're just going to be freezing cold, covered in sand, chafed, and you're just going to be getting kicked in the nuts all day, every day for like 6 months. Right. And that's, and it's terrible and it's awful. So you do that, but you're learning very, very basic skills and you're really not even learning. Well, toward the end of that 6 months, you're learning some solid skills, but that course is designed to really toughen you up is one, but then it's to really, figure out who wants to be there. So it's very, that's the other thing that's different about SEAL selection versus like Rangers or Delta, or sorry, not Delta, special forces and stuff, is like it's very much like self-selective. If you're standing at the end of SEAL training, like you're in. If you're even standing, like if you're there and you didn't quit, you're in.
Just got to make it.
Yeah, you're going to make it. Like if you're still standing, if you decided not to quit. Whereas some of the other ones, there's a lot more of the instructors will kick you out more because like, oh, these guys don't like you, or like a bunch of guys will pass the selection course, but then you didn't get selected. So you have 100 people show up to training. 50 of them make it through, and then the instructors go, well, we're only selecting 25 of you. And so the other guys who made it through, they call it like a non-select or something. And so now you got to go back through training to try it again, which is brutal, right? It's brutal. Terrible. And so it's a different way of selecting. It's like this mind, it's this mind game. Whereas at the SEALs, it's like you have 100 guys show up, 15 of you are standing at the end. You're all in.
It's kind of like it's all on you. Like if you don't make it, it's because of you. It's because of you. You rung the bell, right?
You rung the bell, and that's why they make the training just so like brutal. Because you can have a lot of guys who can fake it till you make it, right? But if you're trying to weed it down to like 15 guys out of 100, then it's like you got to make it brutal, like really brutal.
Yeah. How many points were you close to ringing the bell?
There was only one point where I was kind of where I considered it. It was during Hell Week. I'd injured my back, and I was also sick. So I'd gotten sick the 2 days prior to Hell Week. It was a weekend, and so I spent the entire weekend projectile vomiting, and diarrhea for 2 days. And then I show up on a Sunday. That's when Hell Week starts, on a Sunday afternoon. So I show up to the base. And I'm just sick. I'm still sick, but like the worst of it is past, but I'm just weak. I'm so weak. And now I'm going to go through the most brutal, infamous military selection week like that. Undoubtedly everybody knows that Hell Week is like, this is the insane thing, right? So when I showed up to that, I was already sick. And then I got a back injury within the first few hours of Hell Week starting, because like one of the guys, we were carrying the logs, and he was being a total drama queen, and he like let go of the log, and so all the weight transferred to my back, and so like my back like popped, and I was like we had to put the log down, and so that was like my first 12 hours into Hell Week, and I've still got 5.5 days to go. And with this back injury and the sickness, I'm like, you got to be kidding. So I started feeling sorry for myself, and I was like, oh, there's no way I can make it. Like, I'm going to slow down my team, all this other stuff. Because at this point I'm limping, from the back injury. And so there was a point laying in the water where I was like, well, I'm not going to make it anyway. Might as well just, stop the suffering now. But then I was like, no. I'm not gonna do that. I just made the decision in my head. It's like, no, I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to make it. In my head, I was like, I'm not going to make it, but they're going to drag my unconscious body off this beach. I'm not doing anything. I'm not going anywhere. And that was at that point, the flip switched in my head. And as everybody got weaker and weaker and weaker, I was no longer the slowest guy. Right, and so I was like, now everyone's hobbling around, everybody's hurting. And you're like, okay. And then guys just start dropping like flies because they're having the same thing, but they're having the same mental thing going on in their head, but they're making a different decision than what I made to stay, Yeah.
Did watching other people ring the bell not excite you, motivate you to keep going, or did it kind of give you another excuse to be like, oh, he rang the bell, maybe I could now? So
I was actually very intentional about not making any close friends until after Hell Week. I was like, I'm not going to make close friends because like I know there's an 80% chance you're not going to be here in a month. And right. I didn't want to have that, because you would see guys that were friends together and they would both quit together. And they're just like, because they're all feeling bad, and they're sitting there in the room the night before training, and they're like, and so I was like, I don't want to be around that. But to be fair, I did have one good friend, because we were friends from Wisconsin. We were both going through the same selection course. He did quit. But there was like no way I was going with him. I was like, dude, like, no, not a snowball's chance in hell.
Did he try to drag you out, or he?
No. He was great. Yeah. He was just like, hey man, I'm done. And he just like walked off. And we were like in the middle of training. So I was like, damn it. Like, like kept going. Yeah. When guys would quit, so some guys are a little bit psychopathic. They're like, every time every time somebody quits, like, I feel like I just took another
taking
soul.
souls.
Yeah. I like, dude, hey,
We've
man,
all seen the clip.
bro, like whatever gets you through, like, yeah, man, go for it. And like those guys are going to be like, going to be good SEALs. Cause like, they're going to go out there and they're going to, crush enemy souls too. Right. For me, my mindset was very different. When I saw guys quitting, when I went in, I did not think I was going to make it. I didn't think I was going to quit, but I just figured they were going to kick me out at some point. So I was like, okay, I'm this 18-year-old kid. I show up. I don't know what the heck's going on, and I'm just like, all right, I'm going to try to make it through. And so there was these other guys in the class. I remember there's 3 guys in particular. I want to say their names, great guys. But I looked up to them and I was like, those guys are going to make it. They had great attitudes, great work ethic, like just great dudes. And like in really good shape. And I was like, okay, I was going to try to emulate those guys. And one day it was the second week of selection or of buds. And we were doing what's called grinder PT. Basically, you're doing a bunch of push-ups and sit-ups on that sort of giant parking lot type thing. And I look over, and in SEAL training, when you quit, you take your helmet off and you line it up along this walkway, and so you can visually see all the guys who've quit, and their name is, your class number is on the side, and then your last name is on the front. And so as we're doing this, these push-ups or whatever at the time, I'm like feeling miserable. I look over and I look at the 3 most recent helmets, and it was all 3 of those guys that I looked up to lined up one right after the other, and I wasn't happy about it. There was no like joy of whatever. But then that was the moment I realized, I was like, oh, this is what they're talking about with the whole, it's more mental than it is physical. There was 0 reason for those 3 guys to quit. They were all astronomically better than me at everything. And I looked up to them. And so I just saw all 3 of them quit, one right after the other. Or I didn't physically see it, but I saw their helmets. Yeah. And that made me realize, I thought, oh, maybe I will make it. Because if that weeded out these guys, I've survived so far. And so that gave me a little bit of confidence. And again, I had no intention of quitting, but I was just like, oh, they're going to kick me out. But I realized, like, oh, they're not going to kick me out. They're not going to kick me out. I carry my weight, I do my job, and I'm going to be just fine. And so that to me was like, that sort of, I guess motivated me or helped me understand the game at that point.
I'd be so curious to understand like the psychological aspect of, and I would have to assume, and they say it all the time, like anybody going through super suffering. I remember I read a book, I forget which book, about concentration camps back in like the Hitler days. And the guys that made it would not be the guys that were super pessimistic, but it wasn't the optimistic people, because they would be almost, every day was another day that they're maybe getting out. And then like that would dwindle down and diminish, and then they're broken. Whereas the people in the middle were just like, this is the life we have to live right now. We're going to suck it up and just hopefully make it out eventually. And it seems like the SEALs are kind of the same way. The guys that never got too high but never got too low, you were like, you're going to have to drag my body out here. I know I'm not the best here, but I'm not stopping. I'm assuming the guys that were the best, when they started to feel like they had a chink in their armor, they're not used to that feeling because they've never felt it before. Not like, wait, I can't do this anymore. And I'd be so curious to know and understand why the SEALs would rather, and I'm not calling you like a middle of the road guy, but like a mental middle person versus like these super upper echelon like athletes, Yeah,
that's a great question. So one of the funny anecdotes, and I don't know if it's true, but sort of the Buds rumor was like, whoever the fastest runner in the class is never makes it.
Right. Yeah.
He's never going to make it. And so there is something to that. So what you realize is those top level athletes or whatever, yes, they have great work ethic. Yes, they've worked their butts off, but they've also have a large level of talent. And so that is what has kind of gotten them. They've combined the hard work with the talent, and that's what's gotten them to those levels. Because like you'll have Olympic athletes will go to SEAL training and quit. We've had that happen and whatnot. So you're dealing with people who are mentally tough. You are dealing with people who are sort of elite level. But when push comes to shove and you're so keep in mind, we're preparing for war. We're looking for guys who are we're not looking for athletes. We're not looking for the championship, Olympic team, whatever. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for dudes that you're shot, your buddy's shot, there's dead people all around you, bombs are going off everywhere. It's the middle of the night, you're lost, like all hell is broken loose, and you're not going to give up. Right. That's the guy that you're looking for. And so the guys that are and that's what SEAL training really simulates. It just simulates all hope is lost. There is no hope. This is months. There is no end to the suffering.
There's no end, right?
There's a saying in SEAL training, the only easy day was yesterday. And it's just like, this is going to be worse tomorrow. And you're looking for people who can sort of stand and handle that particular mindset.
Does it literally get worse? Is it like that it gets more challenging, or you're just so worn down that like even if it was the same as yesterday, it's harder?
Both.
Really?
Both. Yeah. So especially the initial portion of the 6 months, the first like 2 months, every day does get harder and harder and harder. And you are required to run faster and run the obstacle course faster and do more push-ups. And like the standards, the standards of get higher. Meanwhile, you're just getting beat to shit. You're just getting beat down. You have no recovery time. Like it's really, really bad. Right. But what they're looking for is guys who could just overcome that, guys that aren't going to, feel sorry for themselves. So yeah, it's a combination of both, especially for those first like 2 months or so. Yeah.
I mean, I sometimes don't sleep well. I'm like, oh, I can't work out today. I didn't
recover
well enough. And I'm like, that's, I mean, do you look back at your old self? You're like, how the fuck did I get through that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I was like, oh, well, I was 18, I was 19. Like, okay. So when I look back at myself, I'm like, yeah, that was a hungry young man that wanted to, to make it through. But all those, I'm so glad that I did. Right. And all those lessons that I learned during that time, shape, who I am today and all that as well. So,
I mean, it's just it's insane and very admirable that you were able to even go through something like that. No, I mean, that was just the training part. Like, you didn't even get it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, congratulations. Now you're ready for what is to come. So you take the first 6 months of, I guess, would that be considered deployment still in Southeast Asia? Mm-hmm. When do you then transfer out? Because you do start seeing battle with ISIS, correct? Yeah.
So my first deployment was to Afghanistan. So I got to go to the show. Okay, I got to go do the thing that I signed up for. It was the second deployment. So the second 2-year rotation where I'm in Southeast Asia. And like, I understood that was a possibility. I understood that was, just how things work. But I realized, again, I don't want to, I don't want this to be my life where someone else is choosing what I'm doing for 2 years at a time like this. So it was just a few months after that, after getting back from that second deployment to Southeast Asia. Actually, so I'll back up a little bit. During that deployment to Southeast Asia, I had this moment of extreme frustration. When I say moment, it was like several weeks of extreme frustration. So one of the military units that we worked with was the Thai Navy SEALs, and so we were doing training with them and ship takedowns and jungle warfare and all this kind of stuff. Like, really cool. Like, it's a cool thing. But I started to become really frustrated because we're right next door to a little country called Burma or Myanmar. And, I'm like, we have a full platoon of Navy SEALs here. We're all fully trained, ready to go. All of our guns, all of our ammunition, like, we are fully deployable. Like, so we could get a call to go take down a ship like real world or whatever. We could if we're the closest unit or whatever. But I was so frustrated because I was like, dude, we're a 45-minute helicopter ride away from villages where people are being massacred and raped and destroyed, and and I'm like, and I understand geopolitically why we can't go in there. I get that, but
why would you be able to?
Well, you can't just send U.S. troops into another country, right? Yeah. You're declaring war, right? So you're doing that.
Can you explain what was going on in Burma at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's been going on in Burma? So since World War II ended. World War II didn't really end for Burma. So the central ethnic Burmese who control the center of the country, they originally sided with the Japanese, and then they switched sides to side with the British as they realized during World War II, as they realized the British were going to win. And so the British ended up leaving the Burmese all these weapons and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, so the Burmese took that and they started to build their own army to subjugate all the ethnic minority populations in the country, which control these different different regions of Myanmar, Burma. And so what's been going on for the last 75, however many years it is, it has been all these tribes are fighting for literal survival against the Burma army. And in Burma, the military is the government. So the leader of the country, they don't have a president, they have a general, and his name is Miao Lai or something like that. And he is the dictator of the country. And so the Burma military goes in and just does ethnic cleansing back in 2017, which was right after I was in Thailand. In 2017, for example, the took the Burma army, and they pushed 900,000 Rohingya, ethnic minority tribe, pushed them out of the country. 900,000 of them, and that's the people who got away, and they were slaughtering and doing unspeakable things as they were just massacring these people Nazi style, getting them out of the country. They didn't want them in Burma anymore. And the reason why they were so successful, the reason the Burma army was so successful against the Rohingya was the Rohingya didn't have an organized defensive capability, whereas a lot of these other larger tribes, the Kachin, the Shan, the Karen, they actually do have organized resistances to the Burma army. So at the time when I was on that deployment, I was like, in my mind, I'm like, dude, we should be helping these resistance groups. Right. These are not all of them, but some of these groups like are pro-democracy, Western values, like good people that just want to live in freedom and peace and want to be left alone.
What is the goal of the Burma military?
Complete subjugation and control of the territory of Burma.
How big is Burma?
That's a great question. I don't know what it is in comparison to like a particular state. Let's just say it's like one average state.
Oh, okay. So very small.
It's not like a huge area.
There's nowhere for really these tribes to go. Like it's so small.
No. There's nowhere to go. But a lot of them still have to live in refugee camps. Like for example, along the Thais have been really great. They've allowed refugee camps to be set up on the Thai side of the border, so there's safety for a lot of these people to run away to. But that's just in some areas. But there's just massacres and bombings, and so to the point now. So where the Burma army, we're at the point where they have Russian-built fighter jets and they're dropping bombs on like weddings and schools.
Wow.
And this just happened. That particular bombing just happened in late May. Yeah, I got a bunch of images and stuff on my phone, and it was all these people. I think it was like 20 people killed, 40 people wounded at a wedding because they sent in two bombers, and they dropped cluster bombs, which are not precision weapons. They weren't trying to bomb a building. They were trying to kill as many human beings as possible. And they dropped it on this wedding. Dropped 2 of these cluster bombs. The bride was killed on her wedding day. The ceremony was over. She was killed. The groom survived, but he was wounded. And then, like a bunch of the guests, and I think it was a Buddhist wedding. So I don't know what the right term is, but the Buddhist leader who did the ceremony, he was wounded badly. And I started getting all these images because it was Stronghold's ambulances that were evacuating all these wounded, dozens and dozens of people, getting them out of there because we're the only ambulances in that area.
I mean, maybe this is ignorance, but like, how is the UN? How do we do nothing about this as a world?
That's a great question, and I wish I knew. So part of it is a bit of apathy. So to be fair, there are so many bad things happening in so many places. You can't help everybody. Mm-hmm. To be fair, right? With that being said, I think Burma, we should be doing more. So there's a bunch of sanctions against like the Burma army leaders and stuff like that, and there's a bunch of sanctions against doing business in Myanmar and certain things. But it's kind of pathetic, honestly, especially based on what the Burma army is doing. Right. The response is kind of pathetic at this point.
Right. And sorry for cutting you off, but and you tell me if I'm wrong. If, let's say, a powerhouse like the U.S. military wanted to go in and shut this down, how quick would they be able to dismantle the Burma military? So we got to be careful here because just historically. So if the U.S. military was to go into Burma, we would lose. Really? Yeah, we would lose. We would be able to dominate for a short amount of time, but we would ultimately lose. It's Vietnam out there, so you're gonna be basically fighting the Vietnam War all over again. To an extent, there's some parallels. There's a lot of differences as well. The solution is not to send U.S. troops over there. The solution is to enable the armed groups that are already there, give them what they need to take out the bad guys. Mm-hmm. And these are like just kind of like what we're doing in Ukraine. Right, that's the solution in this particular situation, in my opinion. So geopolitically, what's going on in Burma? So if you look at a map of the mainland continent of Greater Eurasia, like the entire landmass there, if you look at China and Russia, they are heavily they are heavily focused in the northern part of the continent. They don't have access to closer to the equator and all the different shipping lanes. You look at all the stuff that's going on in the South China Sea. China is trying to, build these little islands, and they're trying to expand their space in the South China Sea. Well, why is that? It's shipping. It's all kinds of different stuff. Yeah.
Russia has no access down to like the South China Sea. All of their ports are like way up in the north and all that kind of stuff. So, well, what do? Well, you find a country like Burma and that has access to the ocean and the south of the country, you become friends with them. So what's going on right now is China and Russia are putting a lot of resources into Burma to back up the Burma army because now you have an ally and now you have a corridor to get to the rest of the world. We put a blockade on China right now. They don't care. They're just going to shift and they're going to start shifting all their shipping and everything through Burma.
Got it.
Down through there. And same thing with Russia. So Russia and China are building giant ports in Burma. You're like, why would you do that? It's because they need access. They need access to the sea in case there's blockades of these other areas. So it's a very geopolitically strategic, important place. People really don't pay attention to it that much, which again, I understand there's so many things going on, but part of my job is to kind of educate on that.
Raise awareness.
Honestly, if we were to take a tiny fraction of what we're giving to Ukraine, let's just say anti-air rockets, the Burma army only has a few dozen like actual good like fighter jets and aircraft and such. So if we just put in a couple hundred anti-air missiles into Burma, you could send in CIA guys or whatever you got to do, so that way those missiles, of course, don't get like lost somewhere. We could knock out this couple dozen aircraft, and now all of the different rebel groups would be able to start properly pushing back and taking out these different Burma army positions, which only survive through airstrikes and through air resupply.
So why do you say that if the U.S. military were to go into Burma, we would lose?
The U.S. military is designed to fight conventional wars against conventional armies.
Right.
We are designed to use massive, overwhelming firepower. That's how our tactics are developed. That's how we operate. Our troops are not used to the idea of going and fighting without artillery support, without air support, without drone support. You go into the jungle and you start fighting, all that goes away. I mean, you could call in airstrikes, I guess. You could call in artillery, but where are you going to put the aircraft? Where are you going to put the artillery? So you're going to start running into the same tactical and strategic issues that we ran into in Vietnam. And so ultimately, I personally think there's an argument to be made, so people will say in Vietnam, we won the war, but like the politicians lost it. And there's like a huge amount of truth to that, to be clear. But when I went to Burma and I started like seeing how like the resistance groups were fighting and such. So keep in mind, I was a Navy SEAL. We're designed for jungle warfare. Like we're literally invented for Vietnam jungle warfare. Right. And not only that, I also did a deployment as a SEAL to jungle environments working in the jungle. And when I went to Burma and I saw how the resistance groups fight and everything, I was like, dude, you drop a platoon of SEALs in here, none of us are coming out alive.
Really?
Yeah, they will smoke you. They know their territory so well.
Okay, that makes sense.
But also their tactics are really good. They will outrun you. They'll just maneuver all around you. And we see the same thing in Afghanistan. So we love to say like, oh, we kicked the Taliban's butt and all that stuff. And that's true. If we could get them to come out and fight and we could figure out where they were, we would just drop bombs on them all day, right? Or we know where there's a leader, send in the Rangers, they'll surround that compound and smoke all the bad guys. But in reality, when you're fighting in the mountains, when you're fighting and doing all this stuff, we would win these little battles, but we couldn't win the war because there's too many of them. They know their terrain too well. And quite frankly, they're going to come out and fight you. They don't even have a water bottle. They've got like maybe a little radio on their hip, 3 or 4 magazines and an AK-47, and they're just going to run circles around you in the mountains. Good luck calling an airstrike on that.
On like an individual, that's like on
an individual or like a small group of them. Right, so right. My point though is, and I think this is what the special operations guys are now shifting and working toward is, there's two different kinds of warfare. One is like, I think they call it like a near peer adversary, which is like where training your army and designing your army to fight like Russia or China or something like that, right? And then there's another kind of warfare. It's like asymmetrical warfare, where you are the more powerful army and you have to fight the weaker army in theory. But usually in asymmetric warfare, the less powerful army oftentimes ends up winning, and that's how America keeps getting beat in wars: Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. We can't actually win them because the population doesn't really want you there. They control the countryside. They control everything. We don't want to leave our bases, all that kind of stuff. So I think the U.S. military is now starting to train their troops to be able to fight more like the the guerrillas to be able to fight like them more. So, and you would think like, well, Navy SEALs and Green Berets, you guys can do that. And it's kind of true, but I don't think I do not think that we are at the level we need to be as a military, because again, after having gone in and seen all this stuff, I'm like, dude, I don't care what, I don't care. All the stuff we were taught in the SEALs, like these dudes would crush us. Wow. These guys would absolutely crush us in an actual like campaign. You know, we might win a particular firefight if we know where they are and we're going to go set up an ambush on them. If we're hunting them, we're going to win. But the actual war, we're going to lose.
I understand. Yeah. I mean, because again, there's an objective to why we're going to war, and a loss is just we didn't achieve that objective. Whereas people, and I would have to assume from the U.S. military standpoint, the greater threat to our nation would be a larger symmetric country, like an attempt of a takeover from like a Russia or whatever. So we're prepared for that sort of stuff. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense that we're not necessarily as prepared for an asymmetric fight because, and I don't know if this is how they think, but maybe it's like, all right, we try this. If we lose, it's not really that threatening to us back in the States. Like that mission was not accomplished or the goal wasn't achieved. We'll just go right back to where we were. And, you know, our lives won't really change that much, but the guys in Burma are still struggling to even survive.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the military doctrine, a lot of it comes from guys who are sort of doing what they were taught to do, right? Yeah. So you have these generals, for example, like at the beginning of the Iraq-Afghanistan wars, you know, a lot of those guys didn't have any like real combat experience. Some of them had been in Vietnam. A lot of them hadn't, you know, so they were a peacetime army now forced into like dealing with this highly complex situation. And so the generation that fought in Vietnam, for the most part, they're not actually in charge anymore going into Iraq or Afghanistan. And so because of time, right? And so a lot of those lessons learned about how to deal with, you know, counterinsurgency and guerrilla warfare and all that stuff, a lot of that was lost. Also, the technology is totally different. So now we're really reliant on our night vision goggles and our lasers and our, you know, and our airstrikes and all that kind of stuff and our drones, which is good. You should show up to the battle. It should never be a fair fight, right? But I think that the sort of that skill of fighting in the jungle and being able to operate in those kind of environments and also dealing with the population that maybe doesn't want you to be there, I think a lot of those lessons were lost in time. And then also we were very angry after 9/11. So we really want to go in and punch somebody in the face. And I get it. I do too. And we need to spend in special ops guys to do that. But you should really focus more, in my opinion, on enabling the capability of the locals to overthrow whatever power is there, support them, build up their capabilities, back them. And then that's how you can have more of a lasting impact in those areas.
Right. That's what they want, I'm assuming.
Yeah, some do, some don't. Some don't want the outsiders in there at all. And this is where like each situation is so complicated, right? You can't, this is one of the other things. So I just finished up my MPA, and I was taking this course on basically how to learn from history. And one of the mistakes that people always learn from history, or one of the mistakes that we see in history over and over again, is people they're always fighting the last war instead of the new war, and they always draw the wrong lessons. Humans have a tendency to draw the wrong lessons from each and every historical thing. So you have Vietnam happens, and they're like, well, we need to do things a certain way, and so you just immediately cookie cutter apply that to Afghanistan. But it's like, dude, Afghanistan and Vietnam, totally different places, totally different, like totally different cultures, totally different people. And you have to really understand the people. You have to understand the psychology. You have to understand their history in order to figure out what the best strategy is. Because maybe Afghanistan, the best strategy is we go in with a whole bunch of troops, we schwack all the Taliban, and we start trying to build schools or whatever. Maybe that's the best strategy. I don't know. But maybe that's also the worst strategy. Maybe we just send in special ops guys to back up the locals, and we just take 10 years and we slowly just shift the entire population to, because like we think that everyone else wants Western democracy. They don't. A lot of them do not have the same values that we do. So for example, we'll go into a country, like Afghanistan's a perfect example. You go into Afghanistan, you set up a democracy. So you think like, well, this is great. This means now that the oppressed woman who is forced in some marriage that she doesn't want to be into, great. Now she can vote for whoever she wants to vote for, and it's a secret ballot, and you don't even know. And it's like great, and it's a good value to us that we like. But if you actually look at the culture, they are totally loyal to their tribe, totally loyal to their clan, totally loyal in certain these different tribal groups. And so you give them democracy, they're all just going to vote in who their current guy is, right?
Change.
There's no change, or they're going to vote for whoever their tribal leader told them to vote for. Like that's exactly what's going to happen.
Right,
and
right.
and there's going to be no real resistance there. So democracy in that case kind of doesn't work in that culture at this particular time.
Yeah, because then you need an entire culture shift, and that's still at the end of the day what we think. Like we think that's what's the greater good for them, because we see it so clearly that like, your women probably should have rights, the same rights that we have.
Yeah.
But the men over there are probably like, no, they shouldn't. Like
Right.
we feel like we are in the right and you guys are in the wrong.
Yeah.
So if we had it our way, you would be living the way we live. So it's very
Absolutely.
hard for us to go in and think we're doing the right thing. We're like, think we're doing the right thing and in the right way. Like you just said, you're doing all this training. You're becoming the best SEALs you could be, all for what? Like, we don't even know if this is going to work as a tactic. And the only guys that know if it's going to work or if it's working are the guys that are there. Like, you guys are probably experienced it firsthand. Our plan going in, guys, this is either working or it's really not. And we can't do much now to change what our process was going into it.
Yeah. And this is where, talking a little bit earlier about the sort of higher echelon military leadership,
Right.
guys that are really well-intentioned, highly intelligent, highly educated guys who know war, they understand war, they've read all the books, they are trying to do their best, but they're inevitably, when you make contact with the enemy, when I say that, like you start a campaign in the country, you have, you're trying to enact this 10-year plan for Afghanistan, right? And so these guys who are trying to do these plans, like they're doing their best. So I'm not sitting here bashing. I'm not saying it's easy. And I'm not even saying I have all the right answers. But what happens is immediately there's this disconnect between the general who's reporting at the Pentagon, he's planning at the Pentagon, and like the Marine who's like walking through, Sharjah or whatever. And it's like, dude, this is not your plan. Like this is not what you think it is. And that grunt infantry Marine walking through a minefield, he has an understanding of like what's actually going on here, that it's so difficult to really get that understanding all the way up to the general, to the Pentagon. You know what I mean? So there's this huge disconnect between intention and reality.
How hard is it to express that to the higher ups, like as you guys on the actual soil experiencing this?
When you're in the military, it's, I don't want to say impossible. Impossible is not the right, because you can't talk out publicly. You can't speak out publicly. You can't come out and, like, hey, here I am. Like, let me upload a quick TikTok from the front lines here. Like, hey, General, what's up? What are we doing here? It doesn't work like that. You'll get, and it's inappropriate to act that way. So what you try to do is you try to move everything up the chain of command. The problem is whatever you're seeing, you tell your officer tells, the next level officer, and then it kind of maybe filters up, maybe not. And then, but honestly, just one or two levels up, they don't even remember what it's like to be walking through a minefield, And so, and it's kind of like the game of telephone, right? You ever played the game of telephone when you were a kid? You say this, and then 3 people later, you're like, what are you talking about? Like, no, that's not even, that's not at all what I was saying. The same thing happens on an institutional level. This is what the soldiers and the Marines are experiencing on the ground. We need to get this to the general. It doesn't get to him. It's an entirely different thing. So by the time it gets to him, like we have taken the objective, we've captured X amount of square kilometers of territory, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, no, you didn't. It doesn't work like that. Yeah.
So when you were pre-Southeast Asia in Afghanistan, what was your sole mission or reason for being there?
As a team?
Yeah.
So I deployed there in 2014, and at the time we were starting to draw down the number of troops that were in Afghanistan. And so I was with a platoon in a certain area outside of one of the large bases. So there's this very large base called FOB Shank, Forward Operation Base, FOB Shank. And basically it's a large airfield. And I was in Logar province, Afghanistan. And so I was with a platoon that was outside of that base, and we were close to the Pakistan border. Okay. And so the Taliban fighters, obviously they take refuge in Pakistan, in the mountains there, and then they bring all their weapons and all their people. And at the time, our mission was literally find all the Taliban that you can that are coming from Pakistan and heading toward FOB Shank to attack the big base. Just find them, get them to fight, and kill as many of them as you can. Our mission was basically to protect that base, to stop the flow of fighters. And these fighters are fresh. They're coming straight out of Pakistan. They've got all the weapons and ammo they can carry. So they're like, these are like their fresh, best guys. Gotcha. And we're more than a decade into the war at this point. So they know the area like the back of their hand, and we're there for 6 months. And so our mission was literally just go pick fights with the Taliban and kill as many of them as possible. Get them to fight.
How skilled are these fighters compared to you guys?
On an individual shooter level, just individual man to man, we're 1,000 times better than the average guy.
How different was what actually happened versus then what was reported back to, say, the general and then expressed to us as the American people? I think probably the best way to explain that would be what happened during the withdrawal of Afghanistan. We were all telling so when you're there on the ground, the idea was, you're building up the capabilities of the local Afghan army. So again, like a good intention, right?
But when you actually fight shoulder to shoulder with the Afghan army guys, not all of them, obviously, a lot of them are really great and really heroic. But by and large, as a group, not effective. The Afghan army was not effective. And so, the goal was like, well, as you're fighting the Taliban, make sure it's the Afghans that are sort of leading the operations and making sure that they're actually, capable of doing this when you guys leave, right?
Right.
And so I was just literally the lowest rank, youngest guy in the platoon. I was not involved in any of the actual conversations of reports going up to anybody, right? But the general conversation was, hey, these Afghans are not ready to stand on their own. Really? We need to train them differently. Like this is not going to work. This is not going to work. And so everybody who fought in Afghanistan or worked with the Afghan army, for the most part, could tell you like, hey, they're not ready to stand on their own. And so when the Afghanistan withdrawal happened, and we all started hearing about, like, hey, we're out, we're leaving Afghanistan. Right. The Afghans, they're going to hold off the Taliban. They're going to hold off all this stuff. And we're all looking at each other like, no, they're not. They're not ready to go. They're not going to be able to stand on their own. And this is another issue too. We taught the Afghans to fight like Americans fight. They're walking around with body armor and they're used to calling in airstrikes and they have drones. So they have no idea when it's just, all right, it's just you and your boys with AK-47s against those dudes in their AK-47s. Like they have no idea how to fight like that because we didn't teach them how to fight like that. And we didn't teach them how to fight like that because we don't know how to fight like that. I was going to say,
how are you supposed to teach them how to fight like that?
You can't.
Who does?
You can't teach them how to fight like that because our guys don't know how to fight like that.
Correct. So who's supposed to go in and teach these guys how to fight?
In theory, special operations, special forces, SEALs, that kind of thing. You're supposed to be able to go in and teach them how to do this. But in reality, when you actually get on the ground, that's not what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like you guys come in with all this expertise and knowledge because you guys have trained properly. Mm-hmm. But there probably has to be some sort of like sit down period to better understand, for you guys to better understand what's really going on. Mm-hmm. Almost like a consultant, like, okay, Afghan soldiers, tell me what's going on. Let me better understand your land and your tactics. And then let me try to craft up what I think would be a better plan for you guys to implement based on what I now know. Because like you said, you can't train these guys to fight with airstrikes when you guys leave and there's no more airstrikes.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's something called key leader engagements, which is where you go and you talk with like the local tribal leader and you kind of get the lay of the land. You try to make friends with them, kind of figure out what's going on. Inevitably, those leaders are going to be sort of standoffish because they know you're leaving in a couple of years. They know you're going to leave.
Like whatever.
And dude, like you guys show up here once every 2 months to talk to me. Yeah, the Taliban are walking through my backyard every night. You know what I mean? And so they're between a rock and a hard place. Even if they want to help you, they're like, dude, like you guys even being here, like the Taliban's going to visit me tonight after you guys leave,
because you're here.
and they're going to want to know what I told you, right? It's like that's the reality of it. So that's on like the civilian side. On the soldier side, and the military side. So you have two components there. One is, do the Afghans themselves fully understand what is needed? Are they motivated by the right thing? And then also, is the U.S. advisor who's there, whether it's a SEAL or regular Army unit or whatever it is that officer, is he really in the right headspace as well to try to make something happen. So you sort of have to have like a marriage of the two, which is very, very difficult to do because some guys go in there and they're like, oh, these are a bunch of filthy, a bunch of filthy third world people. Like they don't know anything. Like I should, like just whatever, keep them in the back. We're going to go fight. And some people are like, dude, hey, like we really want to help these people. And like, let's figure out how to make it work. So there's the gamut in between. So there's a big breakdown. I think at the end of the day, there's not the skill set is not there to really teach and help the locals meet them where they're at.
Yeah,
that's one of the problems I see. And maybe, and I obviously wasn't a Green Beret, but I think maybe the Green Berets are going to be a lot better at that. The Special Forces are going to be a lot better at that because that's what they were designed to do. You send in a 12-man ODA, which is like a 12-man special forces team. And then their job is to go in and build up the capability of the locals, create an army of the locals with what they have and bring in a little bit of fire support from the US and make that work. So like in theory, those guys are gonna be the best at it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's gotta be such a hard decision to make of like if and when to pull out. Because again, like if you wanted to keep fighting as American military, you'd have to like stay there for way longer than a couple months stints to really take out the Taliban in these areas that this is their home, and they're going to keep growing because every time they have children, they're going to become and born Taliban.
Okay, so what I'm going to say next, I want everyone to understand that I don't agree with this morally. So, but there's a reality here. So when you look at the British, when you look at how the British operated with their colonial powers. If you want to go into a country and change the country, so just from a Machiavellian level reality, that's how you have to do it. You have to do it like the British did. You go in, you take out the people who shouldn't be there. You leave like the leader in charge who's there, who's like friendly to you. You prop him up. In reality, you're in charge. You fund roads and schools and hospitals and stuff like this. You immediately sort of bring the local militias into your own army. But then the other thing is, the British officers, it's like, hey man, you're going to go live in India now for the next 5 years, and your family's coming there. Your kids are going to the local, English schools or whatever. But like that's what's going on. So if you want to actually go into a country and change it for the long term, it's like you got to go full on colonial in order to make that happen. What the U.S. military did. Is like we go into Afghanistan, just full blown military occupation. That's an entirely different thing. It's not sustainable because to your point, it's like I'm here for 6 months. I might be back. Maybe if I get rotated back to Afghanistan, I might get rotated back to Afghanistan in a year and a half, whatever it might be. And I'm probably going to be in an entirely different place.
Right. Yeah.
A totally different part. Talking with totally different guys, right? And so there's no continuity. So again, I'm not saying we need to go be colonial. We should not. But I'm just saying if you want to do it, just from a Machiavellian point of view, that's the only way to do it.
To create like almost like a mini America in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sort of like think of like the British going into India, British controlling Burma. All the different places that the British controlled, that was their model, and that's why they were able to do it.
Why don't we do that?
Well, I think first of all, there's a huge moral component to it. Us projecting our world onto other people, that's no bueno. That's very, anti.
Pretty frowned upon, huh?
Yeah. It's not it's not our job to go in and tell other people how to live their lives and live in their countries. If you have to go into a country specifically because you got to completely uproot whatever it is, that's there, and you're going to do it in a longer term, then yeah, you might have to go more like the colonial route. But again, there's a huge moral component to that where it's like, no, we should not be going and doing that.
It seems like you always wonder like how these dictators rise and they think what they're doing is right. And I would assume it's a slippery slope, right? Like as Americans, we would look at an area like Pakistan, Afghan, and be like, it seems to make sense that we should take over and have them live the way it'd be better for them, for us to go in, protect them from the Taliban and create a mini version of America in there. But if you're not American, you're looking at us and being like, you guys want to take over the world right now. Like, who do you think you are? And you may look back and be like, oh my God, we're becoming what we always feared that would attack us in this weird way.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great point. One of the things that I've learned in life is that every single person you meet, they think they're the good guy.
Yeah.
Every person is the hero of their own story. Everybody is completely convinced that what they're doing is the right thing. And you know it because they're doing it. If they realized that what they were doing was the wrong thing, people would stop doing it, right? There's few exceptions for that if people are like doing crime, or you kind of get yourself into like oh, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm kind of doing it, right? Maybe crime or whatever. But like, you shouldn't be doing it. But in general, people believe that their worldview is the correct worldview. They believe that the God they worship is the correct God to worship. And of course you believe that. You're like, I believe that my God's the right God, and you believe your God's the right God. Like that's totally normal. And so yes, to your point, we look at another country and we might say, well, they should do things this way. And at the end of the day, there might be some truth to that. It's like, hey, if you guys acted this way, your country would be so much more prosperous. You would have so much more freedom and all this stuff. But they may not value freedom the same way that we value freedom.
That's exactly the point. Like I would, and again, I completely agree, right? As a Christian, I'm like, I look at my religion, I'm like, how are you all living in ways like this is the way? And they're looking at their religion saying, this is the way, you're wrong.
Right.
But for me, I look at America and I'm like, how would you not want to live like this if you're in Pakistan or Afghanistan? Like this is the way. But over there, like you said, they don't value the same things we value, and they see maybe the turmoil that they think we have, and they're like, we don't want to live like you. So how are you now to project that onto other people? And then it's also like this game of, at the end of the day, all right, maybe we shouldn't care as much as we do. And if hypothetically everybody stayed in their own lane and in their own country, we'd be okay. But that's just not how the world works. And we need to kind of interact with one another and make sure we have relatively the same morals and values. And I think that's when things get tripped up, is when we're completely off. You talk to a Taliban fighter, and he probably thinks, like you said, he's doing everything good and you're doing everything bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going to like Iraq, I watched multiple suicide bombers go off in these vehicles, suicide vehicles going off. That guy, that guy in that vehicle, he's completely convinced that he's doing the right thing. And I completely disagree with his worldview, and I think he's an evil scumbag for what he's doing and the things that he's done to people before he's now being a suicide bomber or whatever, right? But he's completely convinced that he's doing the right thing. And there's this other thing. So kind of bringing it back to America, let's say like just disagreements that we have here in America. What I've realized is that in a lot of cases we have a lot of overlapping values, but they're just in a different order. So for example, let's take the border, right? So there's a lot of contention over the border, right? Republicans say we got to shut down the border. Why? Well, it's like we got to stop the drugs coming in. We got to stop, these criminals from coming in illegally and like embedding in our society. These Trinidad guys coming in. We got to stop this. You're welcome to come here, but you got to come here legally, right? And then on the Democrat side, a lot of their argument is like, hey, these people need help. They're suffering. They're poor. They want to come here and work. We can use, we could use that. We as Americans, it's like, it's great for us. It's great for them. Provides a job for them. Lowers costs for us. And it's like, who are we to keep these people away from what it is that they're trying to take care of their kids. They're trying to take care of their families. And yeah, some criminals come in, but right. So that's their argument. And both, when you look at it on the level, you're like, it's like, man, which one do you choose? For me, like I'm definitely on the secure border side. Shocker. But what I realize is too, so if you talk with someone who's who has that stance, so you say like, well, don't you like, so as a Republican, I would say, well, don't you care about the drug problem in your city? And the Democrat's going to say, well, yeah, of course I care about the drug problem. Like, well, don't you care about the crime problem? Of course I care about the crime problem, right? But then they'll look at you and they'll go like, well, don't you care about these suffering people? Like, you're a racist? Like, you don't care about these people, right? And so that's the argument that's being had. And it's like, whoa. You're like, no, of course I care about these people. Like, no, I don't have a problem with people of other races. That's ridiculous. But what's going on here? So what's happening is we think, so what's going on here is we actually have the same values. We both want clean streets. We both want lower, drugs. We both want these. We want these people to do better. We want them to be safe. We don't. We want to be able to take care of folks, but they're just in a different order. So the Democrat places the well-being of the immigrant, the illegal immigrant, over the well-being of America. They prioritize that over the drugs or the crime or whatever. And they say, well, this is an acceptable, they say that the drugs and the crime stuff, like, well, that's an acceptable price to pay for the immigrants coming in, right? And then the Republican would say, well, no. I value the safety of American streets above the value of allowing people to come in here, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like you have the same values, they're just in a different order. And so then you start arguing. But if you actually sit down with somebody, you talk with them, they're like, of course I don't want there to be drugs on the street. And you're like, of course I'm not racist. Like I don't care. Like, you know, but there's same values, different.
That's such an interesting way to look at it. You ever see like, I forget what like they call these tests, but like it'd be like questions and it's like ranking 0 to 5, how strongly do you feel about these things?
Yeah.
Instead of telling people I can vote for this party, they should give you like this blank sheet of questions and like based on your answers, it would give you an answer of like, you are probably erring on the side of being a Republican or a Democrat. Because I think a lot of times we get stuck in our ways if you're Republican or vice versa. You're so strongly about it where like you can't even listen to an opinion or an argument from the other side. Whereas like if I don't know, it's a blank statement, I'm answering these questions, maybe it's opening a lot of people's eyes to be like, holy shit, I thought I was one thing. But if you ask me the question, who do I care more about, my family or illegal immigrants? I'm probably erring on the side of my family, the people that are here. That should be top priority.
And that doesn't mean you hate the
And that doesn't
immigrants.
mean you hate immigrants, right?
Yeah,
And that whole narrative
exactly.
behind like,
Yeah.
if you're a Republican,
Yeah.
we don't like or we're racist towards other people that are not in this country or they're not Americans. That's so not true. We just value the freedom and security of the people that are here over other people. And that's kind of how it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you get into politics and you start looking at, you know, these value decisions that have to be made, there's also this other truth that I've realized, and it's no politician is right about everything and no politician is wrong about everything. And that is a tough pill to swallow when you really get down to it. So if you're a Republican and you voted for Trump in all 3 elections, if you can't look at Trump and say there is something substantial there, or there is something relatively significant that I disagree with him on, even though I voted for him, I disagree with him on, you know, at least one thing. If you can't do that,
Right.
you're probably not thinking for yourself. You're probably just going with the crowd. You're probably being a sheeple, right? And if you can't look at, you know, Biden or Kamala Harris, if you're assuming you're a Republican, and you can't look at them and go, you know, I disagree with pretty much everything, but they bring up a good point in this area, and I think they're kind of right on that. If you can't find even one minor thing, and it might be very minor to be fair, if you can't find one minor thing where you're like, yeah, I think, you know, Kamala Harris has a point over Trump on this, you know, you're probably not thinking for yourself, and because nobody's right about everything and nobody's wrong about everything. There's always at least a little bit, even if it's just 1%. You know, and so we have to keep that open mind and that humility, not only for finding truth and like who we should get behind and support or whatever, but also it's important for also then holding those leaders accountable.
Yeah.
If you just look at Trump and like, yep, Trump says it, it's gospel. It's like, I voted for him, so therefore I couldn't have been wrong about such and such a policy because he can't be wrong, you know, or whatever, you know. And it's like, well, no. Like if you got to be able to call out your leaders and know that be able to find something that's wrong with them, you know.
And I guess that's the argument against like two-sided parties. If you're now deemed a Republican, like Trump, for example, whoever is running or in charge, if you have a Democratic opinion or value, you really can't express it that well because no, you're a Republican. You can't think like that. Like I'm in this box now, and it puts everybody in, and that's how you win elections. Being in the middle doesn't win an election because you're pissing off or you're not really winning anybody over. You're kind of just staying middle of the road.
Yeah, because it becomes so tribal.
Yeah.
And it's like you're either for us or against us. Exactly. The whole 2-party system. I totally agree. I think this is where the responsibility comes from each of the individual voters being willing and able to challenge the person that they're voting for. Like, you know, if you were to, you know, have a conversation with Trump or something, you might say, hey, Mr. President, I agree with 90% of what you're doing. Just want you to know, and I voted for you, but I want you to know, like, this particular policy you're pursuing, I just don't agree with that. And here's why. You know, you still have my support, but I just want you to know, like, I disagree with this. Nobody's having that conversation with Trump or Biden or Harris or whoever the politician at the time is. And I think that that's such an important skill set. But then the other angle of that as well is, you know, it's like Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility, dude. And so if you are in a position of leadership, if you're in a position whether it's a politician or you're leading a company or whatever it is, you have a duty and a responsibility to embody all the things that we're talking about, but you're going to have to do it on your own because you want to know what maybe nobody's holding you accountable to the same way. So for example, like let's say you're the whatever Democrat nominee for president. It is your job to hold, maybe it is your job to temper your thought processes, your policies, and everything to make them a little bit more reasonable. It is your job to do that as an individual and say like, yes, I'm the leader of this party. I'm going to be running for president, but I want to be really clear here too. I'm running to be the president for all of America, and we can find some middle ground here. Or same thing if you're the like Republican, whatever, right? So it's incumbent upon leaders to, again, like I was saying earlier, the unexamined life is not worth living. It is incumbent upon them to examine themselves and go like, I need to be the best, most reasonable, level-headed person that I can possibly be, because these people, even if they're just voting for me because there's an R next to my name and I'm a Republican, I still owe it to them to still, to think clearly and make the best possible decisions for all of America and not become so tribal if possible.
Yeah. This may be hard for you because you enlisted so young, but how has being in the military impacted your view on politics in general? Not saying like it made you vote for one side or the other.
So there's this idea when people talk about politics, and I was seeing this attitude a lot, like a little bit, maybe a few years ago, not so much nowadays, where it's like, politics doesn't affect your life. Like, who really cares? Who cares who the president is? You're going to get up the next morning, you're going to put your pants on, and you're going to go to work, right? And you're like, no, dude, it really, really matters who the president is. Specifically, when you look at something like foreign policy. So I'm, with the military, the president. This is a bit of an exaggeration, but the president basically has like dictatorship-like powers, like on their foreign policy. The president sets the foreign policy. So, for example, like the president doesn't have to get permission from Congress to withdraw from Afghanistan. Really? One dude, he doesn't have to get permission. He doesn't have to get permission. He can do whatever he wants because he's the commander in chief, right? So the one person can make a huge decision that affects the trajectory of history. One person. The president is like, we're going to withdraw from Afghanistan. Sir, don't do it. Don't do it. Or like, give us 18 months. Like, nope, we're doing it. We're doing it by now because I say so, right? And so a lot of that stuff can also be done with like trade agreements and these other things that you would do in foreign policy. Whereas domestic policy, the president isn't able to do that. Mm-hmm. And so when you're in the military, you see the direct result of the president's policies and so what their intention is. Okay. Like, for example, when I was in Afghanistan, Barack Obama was the president. And I don't know if, I'm not going to say this came directly down from Barack Obama, but, we were not allowed to attack targets at night. We had to wait until dawn if we were going to like initiate contact with the enemy, which is insane. You can return fire if you're attacked or whatever, but you are not allowed to like go raid a building at night, which is like beyond bonkers, right? Why? They didn't want there to be civilian casualties. I don't know. I don't know. And again, but that's insane, right? That's coming down from some policy level somewhere. And I'm not saying Barack Obama was like, don't let the boys do what they got to do, but it's like somewhere the policy came down, and that's totally different than, when Trump became president. I wasn't really in the military when he was president. I was for a few months, but totally different. And he's like, yeah, weapons free, boys, like go crush the enemy, right? So totally different worldviews. And so like, so you see, I guess my point is you get to see the effect of that.
You see the effect directly and the importance. And I kind of relate it sometimes to like, I don't know, religion is an example of that as well, right? Like people that aren't religious, they're like, why do I have to worry about this God or false God? I'm living my life every day. I don't have to pray. It doesn't really do anything for me. But the people that are super religious or faithful, like, no, you have to do this for XYZ reasons. And you don't ever really see the reasons why until like you're in these trenches like you are. And a guy like Barack Obama hasn't had the experience to truly understand the importance of the need for midnight raids or being able to do what you have to do at night and having the go-ahead from a guy like Trump, not that he served, but understanding like he, I guess, maybe sees it a little bit differently and understands what you guys actually need to be doing. Mm-hmm. I've never thought about it, that. Mm-hmm. I guess I wasn't really in understanding of one guy can literally say yes and no to certain things like that.
Yeah. So the president, when you look at domestic policy, he can't just say like, oh, here's the tax rate. Like, oh, here's what we're doing. Like you can't do that, right? We go like, well, of course you can't do that, but he can do that for foreign policy. And so this is one of those things where it's actually a great example of how volatile a dictatorship is, because if that dictator makes a really good decision, well, great, like it's awesome. But if he makes a bad decision, man, the repercussions of that are just monumental.
Yeah.
And that's why you don't have dictatorships, obviously.
Right.
Not a good look.
Right. So you served Afghanistan. That was your objective when you were there. Go back to Southeast Asia, and then after Southeast Asia, this is when you start fighting ISIS directly, correct?
Yeah. So I left the military in early 2017, and so I wanted to go and basically choose where I'm helping people. And at the time, I was like, I'm just going to go to Iraq and do humanitarian aid. And there was an aid group that was there, was like ex-military guys, and they were doing aid in Iraq. And so I got in contact with them, and I said, hey, can I come out and volunteer? I'm like literally getting out of the SEALs like tomorrow. Can I come out? And they're like, yep, come on out.
Wow,
So
you didn't skip a day.
What's that?
You didn't skip a day.
Oh, no, actually. So technically I was still in the military for 2 months while I was in Iraq volunteering, because I had all my leave saved up. So I just took my leave right at the end of my time in the military and was actually already in Iraq at that time.
So because there was literally zero time off, how did you make that mental switch from being a soldier to now a humanitarian serviceman? Like, is that a hard emotional battle for you?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some emotion, like leaving, like when I left the military, because I was like, I just spent, basically, so I was like, 15, 16 years old when I decided I wanted to be SEAL, and then like leaving, like, I'm driving from San Diego back to Wisconsin with like my truck full of stuff. It was huge, because it was like, well, that's a whole different, that chapter is now behind me. Like, I'm no longer a Navy SEAL. I am no longer, that. And the transition though, to going over to an active war zone though, to do aid, really wasn't that bad. It was like, yeah, this makes sense. This is my background. And I wanted to start an organization. My goal was to start an organization to hire guys like me to go into conflict zones and do aid, do defense, do whatever we're allowed to do whatever makes sense. And that's why I ultimately started Stronghold. And that was the goal behind this. So when I went to Iraq, I was like, this is my first foray into figuring out how this works. I don't know the difference between an LLC and a nonprofit. I don't know, like, what are we allowed to do? What are we not allowed to do? Like, I don't know. So I flew over there, one-way ticket to Iraq, and landed in northern Iraq, met up with the other group of like veterans that were there. And my intention and my understanding was that we were going to be there doing mostly, humanitarian aid, pretty close to like the front lines and whatnot. I didn't think I was going to have a weapon, maybe I'd get a weapon, maybe at some point. I was like, oh yeah, I can do security when you guys are doing food distributions, whatever. So I go over there just as an exploratory thing. So I get over there, I'm on the ground for 90 days. During the time that I'm there, we were doing the food aid, we were doing all these things, but then we were embedded directly with an Iraqi army unit. And we would, because at the time the Iraqi army just didn't really have proper medics. They didn't have like a medic program, which is a complex thing. And so I was not a medic in the SEALs, but the medical training you do get is really, really good. So like for combat trauma. And so basically it was like, hey, you're a medic now. So you're crazy. So I go over there and it's like, I'm handed an AK-47 and it's like, this was from a dead ISIS guy. It shoots kind of straight. So we're going to give it to you because you were a sniper. So I get this AK-47 with iron sights that shoots sort of straight. And now you're a medic, and now you're a frontline medic with the Iraqi army. And I was like, okay, this is not going how I thought it was going to go, but more than happy to do it. I'm like, yeah, this is great. Like, this is what I signed up to do. I'm 24 years old. I'm like, let's go. Like, let's do this. Mm-hmm. And so, we did, we're doing aid distributions, we're doing medical clinics and stuff. But then one day, it was actually, I technically had one more day left in the military. Right. Because it was like April 7th, 2017. So this is like my last day of leave, but I've been in Iraq for like more than a month at this point. And the Iraqi army is like, hey, we're going to go knock out this ISIS position in this town, and you guys are the medics. So I end up in this gnarly gunfight in Iraq with the Iraqi army, like full-blown tank battle. Because it was an army, so there's like these Iraqi army tanks, are firing into ISIS positions. There's suicide bombers coming out, suicide cars going off, just for this small village. We're taking machine gun and mortar fire from all these different, ISIS positions, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on? Right. We're walking across this field. Vehicles are blowing up because like it's like basically a minefield, and I'm just like on foot walking through this. And we go through, and I end up helping the Iraqis like clear clear buildings, and we ended up going down into a tunnel, and like ISIS is down in the tunnel. And so we didn't find them, but there was a shaft that we couldn't get to. And so we pull out of the tunnel. There's landmines in the tunnel, like that we're walking around. We're like, it's insane. So we bury the ISIS guys alive. That night, the Iraqis heard multiple explosions underground, because it was the ISIS guys killing themselves. They were in that shaft. They had tried to hide from us.
And they just buried the shaft.
We collapsed the shaft on top of them, and so they were buried alive in like a little chamber, and so they just started blowing themselves up.
Insane.
Yeah. And so that's like, so again, I went to go do food aid, and then this is happening, right?
Was this the craziest combat you've seen overall? Like even your days back in Afghanistan?
That was, I think that was definitely the craziest one that I'd seen, because I mean, vehicles are blown up. There's mortars going off.
Oh
like we're
God.
in tunnels, doing like Vietnam tunnel rat type stuff.
Yeah.
So that was my first experience with that. And I thought, okay, well, this is actually, the crazy thing is I was like, this is great. This is exactly what I signed up to do. I was like, this is great. Like I'm here. ISIS is there. Let's do this. And so basically, a few weeks later, the Iraqi army was ordered. The army unit that we were in was ordered to open up a second front in Mosul, and Mosul at the time was like the deadliest place on the planet. And up until the Ukraine war, it was like the deadliest urban battle that the world had seen since World War II. I mean, it was just an absolute dumpster
Where's
fire.
Mosul?
In Iraq, just like middle of Iraq. Yeah, like it'd be like middle and northern Iraq, if I remember correctly. And so we were with this armored unit, that same armored unit we'd been in the battle with before. And so we go into Mosul, and this starts just 30 days straight of house to house, clearing out ISIS suicide bombers, landmines everywhere. And the Iraqi army is taking heavy casualties. Civilians are trying to run away from ISIS because ISIS has sort of been holding them at gunpoint. That way we can't use airstrikes and stuff on them, because at the time there's also American aircraft flying around dropping bombs on stuff, which we don't have comms with them. We don't have any communication with them. We're just like in the Iraqi army, basically.
Wow.
And so we're bringing in food aid, but we're treating the wounded. We're getting in shootouts with ISIS, and ISIS started then gunning down civilians like crazy. So if you leave the caliphate, if you leave the ISIS empire, you're now worse than the Christians and the Jews, because you're now an apostate Muslim. We're going to kill you. And so they were like shooting children in the back of the head, shooting entire families, massacring people.
Are you watching this?
Yeah. And we're going and we're grabbing the wounded people like under fire to get them out, like kids, all of this stuff. Yeah. So we do that for, weeks. And eventually we get to this area of Mosul, close to the river, because the Tigris River cuts Mosul in half. And we get to this one intersection, and long story short, we'd seen ISIS gunning people down, but we get to this one section, and there's hundreds of bodies. There's over 200 bodies in the street. Men, women, kids. There's a man in a wheelchair slumped over. There's dead 5-month-old babies. There's pregnant women with their heads blown off. There's kids of all ages just strewn around, just slaughtered, just absolute slaughter. When I saw this, I was up in the rubble of one of the buildings, and I looked down and I saw the killing field. There was a moment for about 2 seconds where I was a little confused, and I thought, why is this in color? And I realized I'd only ever seen images like this in black and white from World War II, from, Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, these killing fields of just bodies upon bodies. So I had never seen it in color. And so my brain for a second was like, this is wrong. It's supposed to be in black and white. But I was like, no, this is color. This is real. And so there were piles of bodies. What had happened was like hundreds of people had tried to run away from ISIS all as a big group. They were like, well, if we all just go at the same time, we're going to get out. But ISIS, who had, of course, taken over this multi-story hospital, they had set up machine gun positions in there and had massacred hundreds of people as they were trying to run to safety. And you could see where people had been killed, and then other people tripped on their bodies and then were killed. And then people were trying to climb over those bodies and then were killed. So there's literally piles of people where you could see people were trying to climb over the bodies and had been killed. In one of these piles of bodies, there was a little girl. She was still alive. And she'd been out there for because the massacre happened maybe 24 hours before we got there. So she's been out there just getting baked in the Mosul sun. It's 110, 115 degrees, no wind. You're just getting baked alive. She's probably right down there in that spot. It's maybe 120 degrees. I mean, she's in a bad spot. But she's like the reason she's alive is because she like hid under her, we think it was her dead mother's like hijab. So like the black Islamic clothing, she like hid under that. And so we see her in the bodies, and it's in the morning, and she's not going to survive the rest of the day. She's dehydrated. There was a couple, we saw 2 other kids walking around in the bodies. At one point, there was a boy and a girl. They were maybe 8 and 10, some just real little ones. And the boy, keep in mind, they're like right in front of ISIS headquarters, like out in the middle of the open. They're so traumatized, they don't know what's going on. They're just staying with their dead parents. And they can literally just walk 50 yards and they're totally safe, but they choose not to. They choose to just lay in these bodies. So it's hot. I see these 2 kids talking to each other. I see, the little boy, he's walking around in the rubble, and he finds a piece of cloth. I don't know if it's a shirt or what it was. And then he says something to the little girl. The little girl lays down on the ground. He puts the cloth over her. He was trying to give her shade, and then he lays down next to her. And we never saw those 2 kids get up again. So I believe they just were basically just probably went hyperthermic and just fell asleep and never woke up. And so we're watching this, and you can't just run out there and grab them. We're screaming at the kids like, come here, ta'al, like, come here. Yalla ta'al, like, get over here. And they can see us, but they have no concept. And ISIS is sitting there right at the end of the street in these machine gun positions, and they can look down on all of this. ISIS can hear us yelling. They can see the kids, all this stuff. And so ISIS clearly left the kids as bait. They're like, great, if the kids stay here, the Iraqi army is going to come and try and get them. Or, better yet, some Americans are going to try and come get them. And ISIS was right. That's exactly what we did. So we were actually able to call the U.S. military, and we were like, hey, guys, you need to get a drone over this particular coordinate. We had some general communication with the U.S. military because we want them to know that we're there. I'm like, what's going on? And so we were like, get a drone overhead. You need to see what's going on here. So the U.S. military moves a drone over and is looking at this whole thing. And then basically we're like, if you guys can give us some, like a smoke screen, we're going to try and go out there and get these kids. And we were trying to convince the Iraqi army to do it. So basically the U.S. military was like, we can't, you guys can't call in this, air support. It has to come from the Iraqis. Makes total sense. You can't just have random. You can't just have random people. So the Iraqis, we make a plan with the Iraqis. The Iraqis call in for this air support. And so the U.S. military starts firing artillery, airburst, white phosphorus. So it makes this big smoke screen. So there's artillery coming in and it's exploding in the air. And the Iraqis gave us one tank. It was an American-made tank with an Iraqi crew in it. And so this tank drove straight up the street right at ISIS headquarters. Like ISIS is like 50, 100 yards. They're like right there, up on the high ground in 2 buildings, so they can see us from both sides. But their view is a bit obscured from all of the artillery coming in and the smoke. And so ISIS, a lot of those guys were keeping their heads down, thank God. And we just went on foot. I think it was 5 of us went on foot behind the tank and went straight into ISIS territory. So like you're right there. Like you could chuck a rock and hit these dudes. Like you are right there. And so we get into position. We're walking over the bodies of all the dead, trying to get to this little girl. And there were also 2 adult men who were also alive as well, but they were severely, severely wounded. So we get up into position there. The tank just starts firing rounds directly into the ISIS positions. I don't even have hearing protection on. So it's so loud. And then ISIS is firing at us from different positions. They're firing blindly though, but they're just firing at us from 2 different directions. There's mortars dropping behind us as well, because they think that they're under attack. They think they're under a frontal assault. They don't know it's just a rescue mission. And so we, myself and my buddy Sky, we jumped out from behind the tank and basically just laid point blank covering fire into one of the ISIS positions. And then the team lead, Dave, he ran out, he grabs a little girl and he comes back behind the tank. And then we went out and we got the two men and we started moving back. Unfortunately, one of the men, he fell off the stretcher And so I moved him out of the way of the tank as the tank is backing up. It missed him by, 6 inches. And unfortunately, he was shot and killed. And we just couldn't get to him anymore. You can't get in front of the tank. You're going to die. And so as we're moving backwards, right after I kind of rolled this guy out of the tank, I'm walking backwards. And this is that video I think that you had seen where I get hit at that point. And then we get back across the street back to Iraqi army lines, and then I was, taken out to a hospital and that kind of thing. And we were able to rescue the one little girl and one of the men. And then I think the team went out like the next day and found some other people that were alive in the bodies, and were able to get them out as well. But I obviously wasn't there for that because I was in the hospital.
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah. And I've been out of the military at this point for all of like 60 days, so because of that, I realized, okay, this is possible. It's possible to go to these places and do good work. I learned a lot of like what not to do as well when I was there working with the group of guys I was with. So there's a lot of good things I learned, a lot of like ways I was like, okay, we can do this properly and do it in a much better way. And so that's why I started Stronghold Rescue and Relief. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we go into active conflict zones. We're not as kinetic as like that one particular story. I want to be clear. Like we're not going out and like doing, missions like this every day. That's just not it. We work primarily in Burma, in Myanmar, and we're running, we do frontline medical care, evacuations, and we set up a network of ambulances in this area where there are no ambulances. And these are ambulances that are set up in basically souped up Hiluxes, sort of like a Tacoma. And we're evacuating, hundreds of patients every year from these situations. And then we're working with the local, the local defense guys who are trying to stop the Burma army attacks into their areas. So we embed directly with them for medical support, for strategic support, and helping them use what they already have to the best that they possibly can to keep their people alive.
That's amazing. What are your emotions like towards attempting to take out or actually taking out members of ISIS?
What's my emotions?
Like when you're in that moment of either doing it or attempting to do it.
So it's different for everybody, but for me personally, I'm very, very level-headed about it.
You get excited when you...
On the one end, there's no hatred in my heart. There's no hatred in my heart when I'm doing it. When I'm fighting, I truly am just doing it to defend the other people that are there. It's like I'm not fighting ISIS because I hate ISIS. I hate what they do. I hate what they stand for. And don't get me wrong, I'll hunt them down and kill them all day if given the opportunity. But I'm not doing it out of hatred for them. It's like you're doing it out of love for the people that are caught in the middle. You're doing it out of love for these families that are getting shot at in the back as they're trying to get to you, right? So there's no hatred. Because that hurts you more than it hurts the enemy, right? So for me, it's very matter of fact. Like that's the bad guy. They have to be taken out because of what they're doing. Period. Obviously, so when I was like in Iraq or whatever, it's like I don't have any confirmed kills on ISIS guys because that's just not how it works. They're firing from windows. You're firing back into the window. You go in there. There's dead people in there. Mm-hmm. You don't know who shot them. You have no idea.
Got it.
It doesn't quite work like it's not like the movies. But in the past, when I have taken people out and known exactly who I took out, and because as a sniper, I've
in
done
Afghanistan.
That. No, not in Afghanistan. Oh. in other places. There's obviously stuff I gotta leave out.
That's fine.
But there's parts of the story. But as a sniper, taking somebody out, there's like of course there's like a sense of accomplishment. Like, okay, this is great. Like I did my job. That's great. But there's no joy for me, like in the killing. There's no joy and I recognize the tragedy of like what's going on. I'm like, why do I have to be here doing this? And it's like, well, because you over there are raping and murdering people, and we got to stop this. You can't do that. It's like, so like stop acting like an asshole, and then I can go do a different job. Like I want to be home with my wife and my baby. Like I don't want to be dealing with this. I don't want to be dealing with it. I don't want to do this, but it has to get done. And because if you don't stop these bad guys, they're gonna continue to do the evil things that they do. And it's so it's like there's no enjoyment for me, and I recognize the tragedy of it all because it's all so stupid and really pisses me off.
Yeah.
That it even has to be done.
Right. I'm sure. Your emotions on the first confirmed versus like, I guess the ones after, were they any different, or they all kind of felt the same emotionlessness of, I have to do this. I wish I wasn't doing it, but I'm not sad or happy or.
It's all been pretty much the same. Just,
Yeah.
very, very even keeled.
Even your first, you didn't have any sort of feel any sort of type of way, even on the first
No,
one?
you do. You feel like, oh yeah, like, okay, good. Like because
did what I signed up
you
for.
train, and you're like, all right, like, am I actually going to be able to do this when the moment comes? And then you do it, and you're like, great, cool. But I think there's also a level of focus and maturity that comes with that. It's not so some guys, they might be like, yeah, I got one. That I was never like that. It was very much for me. It's always just been, this whole war thing is a tragedy. I don't like it. It's stupid. It's got to get done. And so there, again, like I said before, there's a little bit of a sense of accomplishment. You're like, okay, thank God my training worked. All right, I did the thing, and I can do it. But it doesn't. You're not like jumping up and down for joy. For me personally, other guys might be like, yeah, I want to like smoke this dude and blah blah blah. For me, I'm just like, this is dumb. Like, why do we have to be killing each other? And
I'm sure the opposite as well. Like, I'm sure, like, you got the guys that are super excited, but I'm sure you ran into guys that did it and then are like, what the fuck did I just do? I just took somebody's life. And
actually, no,
never.
No, I've never seen that. I've never seen anybody with any kind of regret on taking out a bad guy.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, because it's there. It doesn't really work like that. Because when like would you feel bad if you killed somebody who came in, burst into your apartment and was like trying to kill you, and you're like,
I would assume not.
Like, you stopped it.
Yeah,
you're not going to be like, I can't believe I killed somebody. Like, how could I do that? You're like, well, dude, I was about to die. He was trying to kill me, right?
Yeah.
So when you're in war, it's very similar. You're not. I mean, I'm sure there are guys who have felt that, and you see that portrayed in movies. Like, oh, I can't believe I just, like, this moment of I just lost my innocence and I took someone's life. And I'm sure that does happen. I've never seen it happen. What does happen? What does bother guys is when you make the wrong call. When you see movement, you see a head popping up in a building. You're in a gunfight. You fire. You get into the building, and you're like, oh shoot, it was a woman, and she's unarmed, and it wasn't. You made a bad call. Impossible for you to know. You didn't do anything morally wrong. It's just war, right? I had a buddy that he was in a situation like that, and he took a bad shot. Not his fault, just the reality of it, of the situation, and it really tore him up for a long time. Unfortunately, he passed away, but yeah, it really tore him up. So there was that emotion.
I'm sure. How hard was it? Because I mean, that's a great example. How hard is it to differentiate between members of ISIS or Taliban and civilians? Because I'm sure they use the civilians as bait almost.
Yeah. So this is one of the tough parts about modern warfare and the way that these asymmetric wars are fought and the way that these like very immoral guerrilla groups fight. They don't care about the civilian casualties, and in a lot of ways, they actually prefer the civilian casualties because they get a headline. Look at like Hamas, right? Hamas and what they do. They take captives, then they hide behind their own family members. They hide behind the women and kids. The Israeli military calls in an airstrike on the Hamas position. A bunch of people are killed. Women and children are killed, and then that's all you see in the headlines because that's all that they talk about. You only see the number of civilians that were killed, and each one of those is a tragedy. Like it's a horrible tragedy, but you never see the numbers of how many Hamas fighters were killed. They don't report it, right? Because it can become a tactic like that. So whether you're fighting ISIS, whether you're fighting Taliban, whether you're fighting Hamas, whether you're fighting Hezbollah, you're fighting any of these, particularly the Islamic terror armed groups, like they are all very similar in general, sort of obviously religious ideology. They'll have slightly different objectives, right? Hamas wants, all Israel and all of the Jews to be killed. Hezbollah wants the same thing. ISIS wanted to establish like a physical empire caliphate to literally usher in the apocalypse is what they wanted to do. So very different than like the Taliban, who just want to control Afghanistan and make it like a sort of an Islamic government kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on the current situation with Hamas and Israel?
So I think everybody is getting this. It's been really sad to watch how people are twisting what's going on. I don't think it comes from a bad place. With the average person, I don't think fully understands the situation, and it's getting so twisted, and people are getting really mad at Israel. So when you look at the situation, why is Israel in Gaza? The reason that they are in there is because Hamas came into Israel, took a bunch of hostages. I think they still have like 50 hostages, took them down into these terror tunnels, and were like daring the Israelis to come get them. So the Israelis are trying to get their people back. You never hear about it. You only ever hear about, oh, there's starvation and there's this and these other things, which are horrible things. But why are the Israelis there? They are there to get their people back. The entire war could end tomorrow if Hamas returned the hostages, laid down their weapons, and guess what? There wouldn't be a single more, Palestinian casualty, right? So everything that is happening to the Palestinian people currently is a tragedy, and it is unforgivable in so many ways. But who is responsible for it? It is Hamas. Hamas started this. You are baiting an army in to come in. They're trying to get their people back. Hamas knows exactly what they're doing. So here's the other thing too. So that story I just told you about ISIS and me getting hit, right? ISIS, I briefly mentioned, ISIS had taken over a hospital, okay? And so we were not, the U.S. military and everybody knew that ISIS was in that hospital, but they didn't drop bombs on it.
I was going to ask you that question. Right,
because ISIS has a bunch of civilians in there and they're holding them hostage and you can't run away. So when ISIS does it, we say, ISIS is evil. What a bunch of scumbags. Look at all these civilian casualties. That's horrible. Shame on ISIS for what they're doing. But when it's Gaza and it's Hamas taking, basically hiding behind all the Palestinian people and it's civilian casualties because Hamas did it, it's like, well, how dare the Israelis fire their weapons? So for me, I'm staunchly pro-Israel on this. Could the Israelis do a better job with when it comes to civilian casualties, to these other things? I'm sure it's always possible. Are there Israeli soldiers who get angry and shoot people who shouldn't be shot? Absolutely. I'm sure it happens. It happens in every single war. It's not right. It's horrible. It's evil. You should not do that. And you should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for doing that. But make no mistake, Israel is trying to get their people back. And in warfare, there's also this informational war that Israel is losing, unfortunately, where again the entire focus is on the casualties on the Palestinian side, which of course is tragic, but the cause of all that suffering is Hamas. It's like they started it, and then we also look at the Israelis are bringing in tons and tons and tons and tons of aid into Gaza while they're doing this, right? So there's all this stuff where they're taking kids with, which is so evil. The media is taking images of kids with major diseases and things like that, and so they're emaciated and whatnot, and they're saying starvation in Gaza. That child has a sickness and a disease. That child is not starving. Now, is there hunger? Is there famine? There, for sure, of course. Israel is the only country that I've ever seen that actually brings in aid while fighting in the middle of, in a situation like that, drops it into territory that they don't control. Because what happens is Hamas, any aid that comes in, Hamas built their power by stealing the aid from the UN and anybody else that was coming in there to build stuff up. And Hamas has been able to maintain power even now because a lot of the aid that does come in is stolen by Hamas at gunpoint, and then and they distribute it to their fighters and all that kind of stuff as well. So,
okay. So, this is, again, from outsiders looking in, it's so hard to understand. And again, in the beginning, I will err on the side of being like, well, I'm pro-Israel. But then you read more about what's going on. Like, this is a genocide, and they're starving civilians, and they're baiting people, and they're shooting them down. I have so many questions, but I guess my first one would be, why are then we fed this information to make Israel seem so bad? And we don't even hear, I don't even hear anything about Hamas being bad anymore. All I hear on the news now and on my phone is how Israelis are the devils in disguise, and they're trying to take over, and they're treating people poorly. What is the reasoning behind that?
One of the things
it seems like Hamas is getting everything they want right now.
Hamas is getting everything they want. Correct. On the PR war. So
correct.
That's what I'm saying. Hamas is winning the PR war. That's a question I ask myself often. I don't fully understand why there's such hatred toward Israel. I think a lot of this comes down to there's a bit of a cultural angle. Some people just don't like Jews, right? So but I don't think that's the main thing, because that's the typical argument is like, oh, you're just anti-Semitic, you just hate Jews or whatever. And it's like, I don't think that's necessarily what's going on. I think what there's a hatred toward Western civilization. There's a hatred toward Western values, which, Israel is the only like Western civilization, Western value, place of freedom in that entire region. So here's the thing: the same people in America who hate America, like who are from America but hate America, they all are like totally fine with Hamas. Which it's like, how is that possible? Like, how does that make any sense? And it's because they have this common enemy, which is Western civilization. And I don't fully understand it, because I think it's great. I love Western civilization. I love Christianity. Like, I'm like, this is great. Like, this is freedom. Yeah. I love it. They don't like it. They don't like it. So there's that. But there's also just a practical aspect of the PR war, which I've mentioned several times now. There's a practical aspect to where Hamas really is running a fantastic PR war. You also have groups like Al Jazeera, who are backed up by I think it's the Qataris. I could be wrong on that. It's some Middle Eastern country. I forget which one. But they're sponsored by this Middle Eastern country, which also is friendly with Hamas and was friendly with Iran. Okay, so, and then they're the ones making the headline. So you're dealing with an information war here. So that's part of it. And, if Israel does something wrong, they should absolutely be called out for it. And you'll see Israel do this all the time. They're like, yeah, we called in an airstrike. We hit this church. There was a technical error. We messed up, that we were not intending to hit this church. Like, that was our bad. Or like, yep, there was a journalist here, or there was this medical team. We thought there was a Hamas convoy. The frontline commander made a bad call. He told his troops to open fire, and they killed a bunch of aid workers. Hey, yep, we did that. You'll see Israel do that all the time, which is very normal for confusion to happen in urban combat and blue on blue, as we call it, like friendly fire, or taking out people you're not supposed to take out. So the reason that that it's biased, all the information toward Israel is biased, is exactly what you said earlier. You said, we never hear about Hamas being the bad guys anymore, which makes zero sense.
Because growing up, you hear how bad the Taliban is and ISIS is, and Hamas kind of like breezed over. And I don't know, much about it, but I don't know much about it because I don't hear anything about it. All I hear is that everything that is good that I hear about Israel is that's propaganda. And who was just on the Nug Boys podcast? But not only they had a journalist on, the Egyptian guy that like ripped him to shreds for having Netanyahu. That's the guy's name.
Oh, Netanyahu.
So they had him
Netanyahu on. Yeah.
So they had him on the podcast. The Nug Boys are like these guys are just like,
I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
Had this guy on. They asked him the worst questions ever. Like, what do you like better, Burger King or McDonald's? Like, terrible questions. But all that to be said, they then had to like kind of make up for it. They had this Egyptian comedian on that like ripped in the shreds and was like, you were fed propaganda. Your experience in Israel was not real. They made sure that you had a really good time because they wanted you to come back and have this podcast and make it look like, these are the right people to side with. And it's almost like the opposite. Like this guy, I forget what the guy's name was, but he was just like a very well-versed comedian, but he was obviously erring on the side of Palestine. He's like, these guys are bad people. This isn't how it's like. This is what they're trying to do, X, Y, Z. And I feel like it's almost the opposite, where this guy is feeding us the wrong information. And now I'm in this place of like, fuck, I thought I was on the right side. Now I don't know where or what to believe,
Yeah. So this is where, man, it gets tough because there's this a volume effect, right? Where you hear so much of one side, you're like, oh, it must be true. I think it was it Goebbels or whatever, like one of Hitler's like his head of propaganda. He said, if you tell a lie loud enough, often enough, and long enough, like people will believe it. And so the more you hear this, like, well, it must be true because everybody's saying it.
Sure, yeah.
And so it gets confusing, but this is where you have to have some moral clarity. You have to go back to first principles. This is why I started off. You said, "What's your opinion?" And I said, why is Israel in Gaza? That's the entire fundamental question here. The question is Israel right for trying to get their people back?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. Are they right for waging war to get their people back?
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, right? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to send in SEAL Team 6 or Delta Force if you have a hostage. That's what we're going to do.
Right.
Okay. Is it okay that there are civilian casualties if the enemy is hiding behind these civilians? Is it okay?
I mean, yeah, I mean, what else are you going to do?
You got to get it done. You got to get the job done. If you don't take out the bad guys just because they're hiding behind civilians constantly, well, then that's now going to be the new way of war. And they're just going to continue to hide behind civilians. Okay, cool. All right. So is it a tragedy that those people are? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Is there any other option to go kill the bad guys without hurting the civilians?
And I guess that's like, the answer is no.
The answer is no.
The answer, I guess the reason is like the lopsidedness of they have 50 of your guys, but you're killing thousands of theirs. That's not fair. You should stop doing that. But you're right. Like you can't stop doing that.
Okay. So here's an analogy. Let's say a robber breaks into your house. Okay. And he punches you in the face, and you see that he has a knife. He punches you in the face. He doesn't stab. He just punches you real quick. You realize, you look in his eyes like, oh, this dude's here to kill me. So you fight him. You take the knife. You stab him, and he dies. Okay. And then all of a sudden the cops show up, and they're like, so what did he do? You give your statement, and they're like, wait a minute. So he only punched you? But why did you kill him? Like, that's not proportional. So we have this twisted, dumb idea that we have to have a proportional response to somebody who's trying to kill you. So this is a key difference, but it's very important. Your response should be proportional to the intention of the enemy's attack.
Exactly. If Hamas, had it their way, they would wipe out everybody in Israel.
Absolutely.
They only took 50 because that's all they could take.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you should wipe out all the Palestinians. Obviously, that would be very immoral. But that does mean, hey, man, we're at war now. Right. And if you want to hide behind civilians, that's on you, dude. Like, and that's evil, and that's tragic, and it's horrible for those people, for the Palestinians caught in the middle.
You should be blamed for it, not
you should be blamed for it. Every single headline that you see out there that's a tragedy of a Palestinian person killed should be a headline. But instead of saying, look what Israel just did, it should be, look what Hamas just did. Because Israel was probably firing a bomb or a rocket to take out a Hamas fighter in that area or whatever it is. Like, that's on them. You are hiding behind the civilians. You are the bad guys. Like, this is really, really simple.
It's really, it's so obvious when you take a step back and it's like, you hear these free Palestinians chants. And I agree. Mm-hmm. Free them from who though? You're freeing them from Hamas. That's what you should be saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Israel would not be there if it wasn't for, I mean, again, your analogy, but it's almost like the real analogy would be somebody robbed your house, stole your daughter, dragged her back to their house. You went to their house and killed that guy. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, what'd they do to your daughter? Well, nothing, but the intention was to, you know what I mean? Like, that's where the question, why are they where they are? It's a no-brainer. They took your people and brought them there.
So that's a great point as well. Like, so I'm married. I have a daughter. She's 5 months old. If somebody came in to my home, took my wife, took my daughter, there is no end to what I will do to get them back.
Right.
I do not care. And if you hide behind you, I don't care. I don't care what you do. I'm getting my wife back. I'm getting my daughter back, or I will die trying. I do not care.
And nobody would blame you.
And nobody would blame you. But if you're an Israeli and you do the same thing, well, now you're evil. And that's why I'm saying it's a propaganda thing. If the information was accurate, so this is also why you have to look at your information sources. If you're only looking at information sources this kind of goes back to the politician thing too, right? No politician's right about everything. No politician's wrong about everything. If you go back to that principle, well, no side is going to wage war perfectly, right? And so, so you have to apply the same thing to the situation there as well. And the Israelis, are they going to do everything absolutely perfect? No. But when you look at the propaganda, whatever, the one-sidedness of the reporting, when an outlet is only telling you all the bad things that Israel does, and to your point, they haven't run an article at all about how evil Hamas is. They don't remind anybody about October 7th. They don't mention anything about the 50 hostages. They don't highlight the fact that the things that the Hamas does to the hostages. When they don't talk about any of that, and it's all just like, oh, Israel's the bad guy. It's like, that they're biased. You can't trust them. I would at least respect it if an outlet was like, okay, for every bad story we run about something bad that Israel did, we're also going to run a story about something bad that Hamas did. Right. You could at least have, a little bit of a fairness there, which I don't even think it's a 50-50 split. But if they're not telling you what the bad guys are actually doing, then you can't listen to them, because it's like, dude, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind.
My question again, and none of us have the answer. Why? Why are we so anti-Israel? And we're not that we're pro-Hamas, but why are we not? exposing them for the evil they're doing. And the other question I would have is like, assuming they took 50 or they have 50 right now that are
I think it's about 50.
and they're still alive, right?
We don't know if they're alive or if they're.
Let's assume it comes out and they're all dead.
Okay.
Do you expect Israel just to, okay, well, there's nobody here anymore. Let's just go back. Like what do you expect Israel to do now?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, cause yes, they're not, that was the antagonizing of starting and waging a war against Hamas. But if they're all dead, do you expect them just to leave? That's my confusion.
So that's a great question too. So Israel went in for two reasons. One, to get their hostages. That's the primary reason. The second reason is to make sure that they dismantle Hamas. You cannot allow Hamas to remain in power after what they did. When you look at the number of Israeli killed on October 7th, per capita, it's like 40 times worse than 9/11. Imagine if 9/11 happened on that same day, but instead of instead of just the Twin Towers going down and 3,000 people killed, that happened in 39 other places, almost one in every single state across the entire country. Can you imagine like the level of that attack? Right. So the people who did that cannot remain alive. They cannot be allowed to retain power, and that's what Hamas wants. Hamas wants to stay intact. They want to stay in power. They're using the hostages as leverage. And so the question is, well, what happens even once you get all of your hostages back? This is why I said earlier the solution is Hamas needs to disband, put down their weapons, and go into hiding. And then all the Palestinian, maybe not all casualties, but like for the most part, like that's going to end 90% of the issue. Hamas needs to go away. They did what they did, and there are repercussions for doing that. There are repercussions for breaking into someone's house, raping and murdering everybody, and dragging the children into terror tunnels. There are repercussions for that, and Israel cannot let that go. Right. Unanswered. So they have to get rid of Hamas. So even if you get all the bodies back tomorrow, if Hamas is still in power,
game's not over.
Game's not over, dude. Yeah.
How big is Hamas comparatively to, say, like ISIS was the biggest or is the biggest terrorist group?
I think ISIS was and kind of maybe still is the biggest terror group. I don't know because they're weird because they have a bunch of different terror groups all over the world, even in like the Philippines, who like swear allegiance to ISIS. So like all these different like groups were all like, we're all going to be part of this like big Islamic empire. Yeah. I don't know the size of Hamas or how many fighters they have left. Or
are they big or small, like comparatively to?
I mean, it's going to be a fairly small group, right? Because it's a small area geographically. Gaza, it's a relatively small population. So I imagine it's relatively small. Yeah, especially now.
Okay, and now I'm remembering that the podcast where the Egyptian guy came on. Do you think, and this was his point, do you think there was any or allowance of October 7th to happen from Israel to then initiate a war on Hamas?
Would you let a rapist in your house to attack your wife just so you could go fight the gang or whatever? No, it's so stupid. These arguments are so dumb. That is conspiracy theory nonsense. It's such a dumb way to detract away from the reality of what's going on. Nobody is going to allow, like the United States would not allow 40 9/11s to happen. And I know there's a lot of people who are saying like, well, 9/11 was an inside job. I've personally kind of looked at it. I'm like, okay, like I'm open to hearing any arguments. I need to see evidence. I don't see evidence. Oh, well, there's a blurry image here, or like the building fell down weird over here, or this doesn't make sense over there. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of weird, but like that's not a smoking gun. People have a tendency to confirm their own beliefs.
Sure.
So that guy saying, "Oh, the Israelis wanted to have." I didn't see that clip, but I would almost bet if you ask that guy, well, did Hamas rape a bunch of women and men when they came into Israel? He'd say, well, no, that's just a bunch of propaganda. Where's the evidence? It's like, dude, there's tons and tons and tons and tons of evidence. The Israelis just don't put it out on the front page because they want to protect people. Okay, but like, there's tons and tons of evidence of that, and they bring in dozens and probably hundreds, maybe even thousands of journalists at this point to watch these videos where they're not allowed to record, where they bring the journalists in, so you can see all the footage of from recorded by the terrorists. Like, so it's the evidence is there, but they're not going to put it out for people to spread around online. And also Hamas.
But why?
For respect for the victims. You don't want to like put a bunch of videos out of that kind of thing. And also Hamas was, filming, they were filming themselves, doing these things, right?
They want you to show.
They want to show because they're proud of it. It's a good thing. They were calling their parents like, Dad, I just killed a bunch of Israeli kids, right? So my point with that is when you look at what these guys did, They wanted this to happen. They are like they are an evil group. Like these are the bad guys, and that Egyptian guy, whatever the comedian guy is, he probably also thinks that that's a conspiracy, that they didn't commit. It was an armed incursion. Blah blah blah. There's reasons for them to be upset and blah blah blah. And it's like, dude, there's no reason to go in and do these evil things they did. So that guy's spewing the conspiracy theory. If it sounds like a conspiracy theory, probably is. Now, some of them turn out to be true. To be fair, Epstein Island, I heard about that I don't know, 5-6 years ago. One of my uncles was like, yeah, there's like this island where stuff's going on. I was like, okay. I was like, all right, uncle. And then it turned out to be true. Like that was a thing. So,
but look at the evidence that backs that.
But there's tons and tons of evidence, right? Yeah. It's like, show me the evidence that Israel intentionally did this to himself. Like it's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it was like, I forget, his point was like, how would a powerhouse like Israel even allow these people in and they would kind of just like let them in. Mm-hmm. That was like what he was saying.
They didn't. They attacked. Like, so if you look at so there's a huge fence, around Gaza. What happened? Just, I have no inside information. What I think happened is you get relaxed. You get lackadaisical. They're over there. We're over here. Everything's fine. We've got Iron Dome. They shoot a couple rockets every once in a while. Let's just get on with our lives. We're kind of tired of dealing with that. But then all of a sudden they show up with drones and paragliders and all this other stuff. And the other thing nobody wants to talk about, but where did they get the funding for all this? Where did they get the organization for all this? Where did they get all that?
Where?
It all came from Iran. The Iranians prop up both Hezbollah in the north and Hamas in the south, and like the Houthis in Yemen to fire stuff at Israel. So all of that money, like who paid for the paragliders? Who paid for the paraglider training? Who paid for the drones and the technology to knock out these different Israeli positions, like these guard posts, so these guys could come in? Like who paid for the bulldozers? Who did all of that? And it was the Iranians. The Iranians paid for all this kind of stuff. And this is like very, very well known stuff. So you're dealing with so Israel is not bulletproof. No country's bulletproof, right? Look at the Russians, right? Everybody thought like, oh, there's this big giant army, but in reality, you get complacent, you make some dumb decisions. You got a lot of propaganda going on, but at the end of the day, like the Russians sucked. Thank God, like their military sucked. Dude. They got their butts kicked by the Ukrainians, right? And so the same thing is going on there. And so I guarantee you that guy, he's not talking about, there's no conspiracy. There's an actual, like the Iranians are funding this stuff. Like the Iranians are actually doing this. And it's so well known. And Iranians are, they fund and put like Hezbollah operatives and stuff in like Venezuela. Okay. Like they're all over the place. They're this evil, nefarious force.
Yeah. You mentioned Iran, and again, I'm using you as like every time I hear propaganda, I'm like, well, that doesn't. The Iranian ceasefire that then Israel still dropped bombs. Can you explain that situation?
Which ceasefire were they dropped bombs?
I recall like a couple months back where it was supposed to be a ceasefire and Israel still went and dropped bombs on them anyway.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so what happened was Iran has been building up a nuclear program. They say it's for nuclear power, for energy. It's obviously not. The amount of uranium that they have, so uranium has to be processed in a certain way. I'm not going to pretend I understand the science. It has to be processed in a certain way, which takes time to make it to make it to the point where you can use it to make power.
Sure.
But then you have to process it longer using other equipment to make it weapons grade so you can actually have like an atomic bomb, right? So Iran had this uranium and they processed it way past the point that they needed for actual nuclear power, okay? And so the Israelis know this, everybody knows this. And so Israel got to the point where they were like, we're going to go in and we're going to knock out the Iranian military. We're going to get done. We're going to go knock out all these different air defense positions. The Iranians are firing rockets into Israel. They're obviously backing Hamas and Hezbollah. It's time to go sort of cut the head off the dragon here, right? So they went into they went into Iran. I forget how many days it was. It was like, what are they calling it? The 7-day war or 6-day war or something like that. So they go in for like a week or whatever it was. And the Israelis are just beating the crap out of the Iranians. They obviously had this plan ready to go, which you have to do that because the Iranians have said, when we get a nuclear bomb, we're going to use it on Israel. Would they actually use it? Maybe, maybe not. If you're Israel, you're not taking that chance. At a minimum, they now have a nuclear threat, which means that you can't go take them out later, right? So Israel goes in, knocks out a bunch of Iranian leaders and knocks out a bunch of their infrastructure. And then President Trump allowed the B-2 bombers to come in and knock out the Fordow nuclear facility where they were enriching this uranium to turn it into weapons, right? Very clearly. And so after that, President Trump basically got Israel and the Iranians was like, hey, like, all right, the nuclear threat's done. Stop the war. Like, we're done with this. Like, let's just knock it off. Let's have a ceasefire. And so a ceasefire was put into effect. It was supposed to go into effect at like midnight on one of these nights or whatever. And historically, ceasefires are very, very touchy because it's very easy to say like, oh, the ceasefire ends at midnight tonight. But it's like, dude, there's airplanes in the sky. There's stuff going on. You still got operatives on the ground. There's like stuff going on. And then one side or the other is like, yeah, let's see if you guys want to, like, they'll poke you a little bit to see if you're going to respond because they want to keep stuff going. So they're going to kind of get in the last little jab, right? So the ceasefire happens. Israel claims that Iran has still fired a couple of missiles or something like an hour or two after the ceasefire was supposed to be in place. And so they launched some aircraft to go knock out these positions. And then Trump called them up and was basically like, dude, I understand that they fired these missiles, but turn your planes around and come home. Just stop. Like, we're done. We're done with this war. So he like basically forced the Israelis to not escalate from that point. The Iranians allegedly got in like an extra sucker punch. He made the Israelis come home. Let's just stop it like here. So again, that's a great example of all you hear about of that entire story is the Israelis broke the ceasefire and they wanted to go bomb. So it's like, dude, that's not what happened.
It's so, and again, the same question is like, why does it seem like the world is against Israel? And you got to keep in mind also, like, geographically, they're in quite possibly the worst situation ever. Like, we are surrounded by water, ally. They're surrounded by enemies everywhere that literally hate them, want them wiped off the face of the earth. Yeah. And then we get angry or we raise our eyebrows to them just like defending themselves. You know, like what do you want them to do at this point? You know?
Right.
Like the whole holy, like, whose land is it? I don't know. I guess it's up for debate. That's not my debate to have. Yeah. But it's like, what do you want them to do with Hamas trying to, take out their people?
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's a good point too. So there's this big argument about who was there first, right? So you look at the term Jew, the ethnic term Jew. It's like, well, it comes from the term Judea and Samaria, right? You heard the term like the Good Samaritan, right? So that's a biblical term because it was the Jews and the Samaritans, and at the time, a lot of them didn't like each other, and that's why we have the story of the Good Samaritan who helped the Jew because those people at the time didn't like each other. That's kind of where that parable comes from, right? So that goes back thousands of years, right? And then you have so from what I understand, like the Jews were technically the first ones there. And then you have other Arab and Middle Eastern groups come in there. The Islamic conquerors come through there, take Jerusalem. So there's all this land and stuff that goes back and forth. And, quite frankly, to empathize a little bit with a Palestinian person, it's like, bro, like we've been living here. My family's been living here for the last like 200 years in this particular land. Let's say it's somewhere in like the Judea and Samaria area. They also call it West Bank. It's like you're living there. It's like, dude, we've been living here for 200 years, right? My family, my Palestinian family. Sure. I don't care about some 2,000-year-old thing, whatever. Like, this is my land now. Like, let's just, we're here. Like, we're here. Like, just, whatever. I don't really care. So I can empathize with them on that frustration a little bit, to be sure. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at like the existence of the state of Israel, it's like, hey man, everybody just needs to realize like Israel ain't going nowhere. Like they've got their land, like they're back to their homeland for the most part. They're not going anywhere. You're not going to beat them. So just accept reality. Okay. Like just accept reality. But this is also where ideas have consequences. This is where ideology really matters. And so there's this I forget the term, but there's this principle in Islam where when Islam has conquered an area, that now is that land now forever, like that's Islamic land. Even if the Christians or anybody takes it back, like no, that's Islamic land. You are now tied to that land. Islam is now tied to that land. You are required to go take it back at some point, right? Right. And so in their mind, it's like so there's no willingness to accept the reality of Israel being there because they're like, no, it's now it's ours and we need to take it back, right? So it's like, don't get me wrong, I can empathize with some of the frustration of the Palestinian people who are there. I can see the frustration a bit, but there's also a reality like, hey, Israel's here, and so you got to make it work. Yeah.
I mean, so again, you mentioned like they took the hostages. Let's assume Hamas gives these hostages back. What do you then think Israel does?
If they give the hostages back, it all depends on, again, whether or not Hamas disarms. Hamas has to be taken out. And then also you have to make sure that there are measures in place to make sure that another October 7th doesn't happen again in 3 or 4 years. And so there's multiple different strategies that could be looked at there. I think right now the Israelis are looking at sort of going in and just sort of occupying all of Gaza and basically just locking it down until they're able to put another Palestinian government or something in place, or like run some kind of elections. I'm not really sure what the end state there is. I'm not sure there's a really great option, because at this point too, the Palestinian people are not super stoked about Israelis being there. So like the chances that, so keep in mind too, like the Palestinian people voted Hamas in. Like they were given democracy and they promptly voted for Hamas. And so now, so that was their choice, right? So we talked about different places, maybe democracy doesn't work. So the question is, all right, if at this point, if Israel is able to set up some sort of democracy or something where the Palestinian people can choose their next party, are they going to be like friendly toward Israel? Probably not. You know what I mean? So it's like, this is going to continue on and on and on. And this is why, like harsh measures might be required, to just sort of like, hey, like until you guys are willing to like stop trying to kill all of us, we're just going to keep, we're just going to maintain, troops here in Gaza. And because like, we can't have October 7th again. We just can't have it. And
it doesn't seem like Hamas cares, like they kind of embrace this, like you said, they don't necessarily care when their own civilians are dying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a feature, not a bug, right? Like it's not like this is something like to them that is good. Cause like, again, we go back to ideology. They see it as like, well, you're being martyred. You're going to go to heaven now. Like
honor, you're honor in that.
You're a very, very good Muslim because you did this. Right. And so this is where so earlier we were talking about how you might have two different people with the same values, just in a different order.
Yeah.
Well, this is a situation where you have two entirely different sets of values, and it's very difficult for the Western mind to understand that, they don't value the same things that we do. There was recently a terror attack, a guy in like Colorado. He was going to go through like Molotov cocktails at some sort of conservative, demonstration or something. I think it was Colorado. I forget where. But the important part of that story is he filmed himself before he went to do this terror attack, and he has a wife and children at home. And he said something along the lines of like, the cause of Allah is greater than my family, and these different things. And so he knows he's going to be either killed or put in prison as he goes through these Molotov cocktails, but he doesn't care, because now there's this entirely different value system where he's like, this is the good. He's like, I think I'm the good guy. I think I'm doing the right thing. Yeah. And if that leaves my wife and my wife alone and my children fatherless, like, well, too bad, because doesn't like matter. Allah is the greatest, or whatever it is. Right. So that, so the ideology there really, really matters.
Yeah. How do you see it ending, if ever?
The Israel thing, I don't know that there's any, sort of
solution,
quick, easy solution. So, okay, like here's an example. Look at, slavery in the United States. So we have slavery. It's this terrible evil. We fight a huge civil war, hundreds of thousands of people killed, that being like one of the core central issues. And we're still hundreds of years later, maybe like actually not hundreds, maybe 150 years later or whatever. We are still dealing with the repercussions of all of that. And we fought the war to like end it, right? Yeah, so we sort of air quotes came up with a solution, and it's like, hey man, but there was still like huge institutional racism for decades and decades and decades. I mean, there's people today who, there's people alive today who, were like the first black folks going into desegregated schools and stuff. I mean, there's still people alive today, and they're not even like old, like they're just,
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not that long ago. And so this stuff takes a long time to heal. And like, there's still arguments and battles about like, okay, well, what are the long-term repercussions of slavery and how it affected the black population over the long term? And there's still anger and angst over that.
Right.
And some people are reasonable about it. Some people go like off the rocks about it. But now imagine that times like 1,000.
Yeah.
And in Israel, and that's, imagine you actually get to the point where you like make peace between the two. It's like, dude, you're going to have hundreds of years. It's going to take several hundred years to really get everything to kind of calm down.
Those people are going to be begging, rightfully so, for their rights back, but then also like what do they call it when they're owed something for their past?
Oh, reparations.
Right, like they're going to be asked for reparations forever.
Right,
Like those people are getting zero start in life. You know what I mean? Like they're building up their homes and things like that. I mean, yeah, that I've never even thought of the correlation between like we're still, and we have people now that are like, we're dealing with more racism now than we've dealt with. And I'm like, really? We used to have separate bathrooms. Like,
yeah, it's 100% not true.
You
Like
know
that's
what I
what I'm
mean?
saying. Like some people take it and they're
Yeah.
like, oh, it's like just like it was back in the Jim Crow era. It's like, dude, stop.
Not
Like,
even
it's not even
close.
close.
Not
This
even
is
close.
You know it's not true. We know it's not true.
Right.
It's like,
But there's
you
going
know
to be
that we know it's
irrational.
not
There's
true.
going to be irrational people, and like you said before, the louder lie normally wins. You know, and that could be ringing over the lives and influencing people that it probably shouldn't be influencing. That's probably why we feel like racism is really, really bad right now. But it's the best it's ever been.
It's the best it's ever been. It's great. I think things are, obviously things aren't perfect, but like no place is perfect. No time is perfect. And you can exacerbate the problem or you can move on. So one of my things is, when I look at the race relations specifically, listen, the Black community 1000% was dealt a bad hand. Because of the history there are repercussions from that. There's institutional repercussions. There's so many different things for sure. With that being said, there, as an institution, as a country today, you're not discriminated against. Point to me one law that actually legitimately says, something about, Black people, not something that just, maybe affects Black folks differently than it affects white folks,
Right, of course.
or any other group. Like, no, something that actually discriminates you in the law. And I'm 100% against it, of course. But I think the solution to move forward at this point, and this is, I'm not sure if I have the right words for it, but I hope you'll understand what I mean. It's there comes a point where you have to forgive. If you today feel like, if you're a Black person today and you feel like the country and everybody's 100% against you and all this, and there's this anger of what happened in the past, look around today. You are not discriminated against anymore. That's just not true. Anybody who's telling you that is lying to you. It's just not true. And if you are angry about the past, which is totally reasonable, whatever happened to your grandfather, your great grandfather, whatever, that's horrible. But what you need to do, the true solution here is forgiveness. Just forgive others in your heart, because it's about, that's the only way you're going to move forward. And this, if you start demanding reparations from people who never personally hurt you,
Right.
you are going to continue the cycle of hatred and anger, and it's never going to get any better. So ironically, forgiveness is the best thing for you. Yeah.
Circles back to why I believe religion is so important for
Amen to that.
everybody.
Yeah.
The right religion, of course.
Yeah.
How is Burma right now? Are you guys seeing progress at all?
So the war in Burma right now, the Burma army is more violent than ever. Things over the last 2 years, things took a turn sort of for the better, which is kind of counterintuitive to say, because the fighting got a lot worse, but it was because a lot of the people were rising up against the Burma army. So that's a good thing. However, the fighting has stayed just as bad, but the Chinese and Russians are now backing up the Burma army a lot more than they were 2 years ago, because it looked for a short time like the rebels were going to knock out the Burma army, and so the Chinese and the Russians weren't so hot on kind of doubling down on helping them. Whereas now that has shifted, and the Russians are bringing in more fighter jets, the Chinese are bringing in tons of ammunition and stuff like that.
So they're only coming in when they think they're going to win.
For a short time there, it was a little bit
They
rocky.
gave up.
They didn't quite give up, but they were kind of like, all right, let's see if the rebels,
do this.
can take it out. But the rebels weren't able to do it fast enough, and then the Burma army was able to bring it back. So yeah, we're seeing tons of casualties today. Our ambulances are moving. I get messages pretty much every day on my phone of one of our ambulance crews dealing with landmines or airstrikes or whatever. Yeah.
Is it? I mean, because you say tribe, I think of sticks and stones. Is it really that lopsided comparatively of their military versus these tribal? Rebel teams.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Burma military, the Burma army, they sort of fight like a conventional army.
Right.
So it's kind of bizarre. They're all about securing roads and having convoys and having compounds where they have their troops in these bases, and they have fire support and air support. So they are sort of like the conventional army. And the rebels, and when I say rebels, think like Star Wars rebels, like the good guys. They are they're much less technologically advanced, have way less resources, and now you're fighting this much stronger army. So like on a tactical end, day-to-day actual fighting, it's they are the guerrilla fighters there. It's like the Taliban trying to fight against like the US Army, right? But now the Taliban are the good guys and the US Army are the bad guys, right? Like that's kind of how it is.
Yeah. And it'd be like the Taliban in America trying to fight the American military. It's like there's you almost have no chance.
It's really
so
really
it is
tough.
that lopsided.
It is that lopsided. Not quite to the same amount because the American military is just so strong, but basically, yeah.
Man, I mean, and not that that's like deflating for you as people that are trying to come and help, but like, do you see a time where the military is overthrown? Like, what do you think the results are in Burma?
I think I do see a possibility, a way forward. If the U.S. or Australia or just anybody can see 5 years, 10 years in the future and see what the Russians and the Chinese are doing there. Like I said, you could literally just send in 100 anti-air missiles, kind of put them in a like, I'm talking like shoulder fired rockets. You could just put those in a handful of key locations, knock out these aircraft. You could totally change the trajectory of the entire war there, and you could knock out the Russian and Chinese expansion going on. You wait 5 years, you wait 10 years, it's going to be an entirely different story. So there's a small window of time here where I think big change could happen. And I think now is the time to act. But as far as like it being, discouraging, I mean, it's frustrating because it's like I'm not the president. So I'd love to be able to sit down and talk with him and go like, hey, sir, like let me show you the map. Here's what the Russians and the Chinese are doing. Like you guys are focused here. Totally get it. But a very small investment today will prevent a major war later on.
Does there seem to be any potential action being taken?
No, and I think recently, I believe as far as I've seen nothing. And I think just like a week or so ago, the Trump administration lowered some of the sanctions on people like associated with some of the Burma army generals, which I do not understand. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what is going on here? These are bad guys.
Do you think they just don't understand the severity?
I think they don't understand. I think they don't understand like what's going on the ground there. We don't have tons of information. And I think there's focus in other places too. So I don't think there's anything nefarious. It's not like, oh, the Trump administration is backing this dictator. That's not what's going on. I think there's just a lack of understanding of the importance of what's going on there, is my opinion.
It's crazy. Again, going back to your point of like, he does have say, and not that it's a dictatorship, he's the commander in chief, that like you could hypothetically get the right people in his ears to be like, hey, this is what's really going on in Burma. And here's why you as an American should care about the potential threat of like a Russia or a China.
Yeah.
And that like he could be convinced, like it's just a weird thought that like you could have an impact on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If I had 10 minutes with the president, I could I'm not saying I could change his mind, but I could give him a whole new perspective of that area and just go, respectfully, sir, here's something we need to look out for. The Russians and the Chinese are saying this to you, but you got to look here. They're basically they're building a back door. So like, for example, let's war game this. Let's say China blockades Taiwan. And so we do a counter blockade of China, right? Or something like that. I don't even know if that's even a reasonable thing. But let's just say it's like, well, if China has the back door through Burma, well, now that's one option off the table for us. Or we have to split our forces to deal with the Russians and the Chinese down in the south. And then we also have the South China Sea, where we have to have the U.S. Navy along with maybe like the Japanese Navy or something. So like there's like you're not doubling the complexity of the situation. You're like quadrupling the complexity of the situation if you give them another outlet.
Right. If it gets to that point.
If it gets to that point, which it's going to be at that point within the next 5-10 years, like for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you don't have it. I mean, it's crazy again, because there's so much going on that like you're almost missing what could be the most important thing that's going on.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's the most important thing, but it's pretty darn close. It's definitely up there. Like we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like we can be negotiating peace in Ukraine while also realizing like, hey, the Russians are also coming down here too, and the Chinese as well. Like, and if the Russians and the Chinese are like, in cahoots on something, it's like you should pay attention.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is the current situation like in Ukraine?
So I went to Ukraine only right at the beginning of the war. So from what I understand, President Trump just had he just had a meeting with Putin, and then I think it was yesterday, or the day before, he had a meeting with Zelensky. So I don't know when this episode's going to air, but that was sort of what had just happened. And right now, I believe they're trying to set up a trilateral meeting, basically, where you get President Trump, President Zelensky, and then Vladimir Putin all in the same room to sit down and have a conversation. Now, most likely, what's going to have to happen for there to be peace is there's probably going to have to be some land concessions from the Ukrainians, meaning they're going to just have to say like, yep, Russia, what you hold currently, we're going to take. I'm not sure, but I think the Ukrainians currently hold a tiny little bit of Russian territory, I believe. I could be wrong on that. But so I think there's going to be some land swaps where the Ukrainians are like, we're going to withdraw from this area, you withdraw from this area, we're going to draw a line here.
That's crazy.
And so the Russians are going to get some of it, but not all of it. But then on the Ukrainian side, here's the big thing that Ukrainians are looking out for and that they need to have guarantees that the Russians can't just come back again in 5 years once they've regained their strength. And so the real sticky point, I think, of the negotiations currently is and will continue to be what kind of security guarantees can you have? So, for example, do you put a bunch of NATO troops in Ukraine? Do you keep like just a trigger force there? Do you keep like actual combat ready troops there? Like, what do you do? Do you have American companies go in and have like private security companies that are, securing like, rare earth mineral sites and things like that? So now there's Americans on the ground. So now Russia's not going to necessarily do that because you start killing American citizens. Well, now you got America. So I believe that's sort of the crux of like what's going on. There's a million other little details, but I think that's kind of the main issue at the moment for the peace talks.
It's crazy because again, like you think about, like this border is now shifting, and like we have a border between us and Canada. Like shifting that border is not just like, we draw a line on a map. Like there's just so much that has to go on to make that change.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's not just like a snap of the fingers. All right, now this is your land, this is my land. It's mind blowing to think like this is reality for people. What is your overall opinion on the matter?
Well, first of all, undoubtedly, zero question in my mind, Putin is evil. The Russians are the bad guys. Period. Done. End of story. There's no middle ground here. There's no like understanding. It's similar with like Hamas. It's like, dude, you're the bad guys. You're the aggressors. I have zero sympathy for you. You're the bad guys. Period. Done. End of story. And I wish the Ukrainians had the ability to get rid of the Russians from all Ukrainian territory. I wish they had the ability to. So when I was in Kyiv right at the beginning of the wars, the Russians were still like surrounding and fighting around Kyiv. I was there with Stronghold. We were doing some work there. At the time, even once the Russians stopped and kind of turned around, I realized pretty early on, I was like, the Ukrainians are not going to be strong enough to get rid of the Russians from all of Ukrainian territory, but also the Russians are not strong enough to take Ukraine. And so inevitably what you end up is sort of the situation we're in right now. It's roughly a stalemate. There's the lines shift a little bit here and there, but you're sort of in a stalemate. And without the entrance of a bunch of additional NATO troops to come in and fight, which now is World War III, so that's not an option, right. You're not going to get the Russians out. And so there's unfortunately, on a moral level, the Ukrainians deserve to have all their land back on a moral level. But in reality, that's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And so you have to be pragmatic and realistic about the situation. And I think just armchair quarterbacking here, I see this situation Zelensky's in, and I'm like, you got to give some land swaps. You got to do some land swaps to get an end to this, assuming you actually do get security guarantees. And I think that's your best. That's making the best out of a really, really bad situation.
Right. What sparked this war anyway?
So the Russians claim, so if you look at the history, the Russians basically claim that all of Ukraine is Russian territory.
Got it.
And it was part of the Soviet Union in the past, and all that. So ultimately, at the end of the day, this is Putin. So in the Russian mindset, in the Russian mind, you're not really a great Russian leader unless you've conquered more land.
Got it.
And so that's why the Russians they do, little incursions, or they try to take countries here and there. The greatest of them all would be to reclaim Ukraine. And so when the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine actually had a bunch of nuclear weapons in the country. And so so what happened was they were like, so basically Russia couldn't just come back in and take Ukraine, which is like a good thing, right? So you have that nuclear deterrence. I forget who or what the timing was, but the Ukrainians gave up their nuclear weapons and allowed them to be taken out. I don't know which direction they went. I don't know if they went back to Russia or they went back to like the West. But anyway, they got rid of all their nuclear weapons in exchange for a piece of paper that was a security guarantee from the West, saying, so the West was concerned like, oh, we don't want like all these nuclear bombs in this place. Let's get rid of the nuclear bombs. And if anything bad happens to you, if the Russians come at you, we're going to back you up.
Who's we?
The West, NATO, I believe.
So why didn't they when?
Because it's just a piece of paper that says we're going to come help you at the end of the day.
So how could they trust this?
That was exactly. That was then. This is now. This is why the security guarantees today have to be very solid, and it has to be no. I don't want a piece of paper that says you're going to come help me. I want you to have, Lithuania, or maybe not Lithuania, whatever. Like I want French and British troops
ready.
No, in Ukraine, ready to fight. Like, you're just sitting there and it's a deployment and you're just going to like do some training with us. And you're literally just sitting there in case the Russians come pouring across the border again.
Wow.
As a deterrence, right? So like you have to have much stronger, deeper ties.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a history there and lack of trust.
So is Putin just one day waking up and saying, you know what, that's our land and we're going to go take it back?
It's him. It's not him waking up one day and saying that's our land. That's him growing up thinking Ukraine must be reunified back to. So this is a deep ideology. He believes that is like, I must conquer land. I must reunite the empire.
And that's not that he woke up one day, but he waited for them to not have nuclear weapons. And this like why all of a sudden did he just say, you know what, now we're going to go.
Oh, so this is actually interesting. If you talk to a Ukrainian and if you look at the history, well, everybody asks like, well, why did Putin invade in 2021?
Right.
And they'll say he didn't invade in 2021. He invaded in 2014.
Huh.
So if you look at Crimea and a lot of the areas in eastern Ukraine, Russia started this war in 2014. This war has been going on since 2014 under Barack Obama. So typically the way it works, so also talking about politics, this is funny too. So when I was in Ukraine, they would ask me, they're like, are you a Republican or a Democrat? And I was like, oh, I vote Republican. And they go, oh, okay, good. They're like, every time the Democrats are in, we don't get support for defense. And then every time the Republicans are in, we get support for defense as well. So if you look at all the different presidents, when there's a Democrat president in power, the Russians will make these big moves. When there's a Republican president, they either make less moves or they're real sketchy about it. When Trump was in the first time, 0 moves. Or Russia made 0 moves. They didn't do anything. They just sort of held the territory that they had currently. So if you go back to 2014. The Russians have controlled Crimea and a lot of eastern Ukraine, and then so this struggle's been going on for a long time. What was different about this one was the Russians brought in like their full army, whereas in like 2014 they were bringing in like, they were like kind of backing up like armed groups. They had like Wagner. They were kind of Wagner group. They were kind of bringing in like plainclothes undercover people to try to like arm resistance groups. It was sort of like a quasi war. This was like full on. The entire Russian army's going for your capital.
Why in 2021 did they decide?
Because Afghanistan. At the end of the day, you look at you're playing poker. What's going on? To an extent, this is an oversimplification, but when these world leaders are sitting there kind of playing poker with each other, and so you see what happened with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and you see this like, oh, the U.S. is withdrawing from the world stage. Wait, did I say the invasion was 2021? I meant 2022. But you see the U.S. is withdrawing from the world stage. You see that we have no will to fight. It's a Democrat president. A very, very weak Democrat president who is allowing Afghanistan to fall. Perfect. Now's the time to go.
Yeah. Okay. So they felt
they felt it was the time to go. That's the reality of the timing situation. Yeah.
I guess because this is so interesting to me.
Yeah.
2 follow-up questions. Do you feel like we gave too much aid and support, as in like dollars, to Ukraine, and then you feel like now Trump is too close with Putin?
Okay, so both of those talking points, I think, are sort of propaganda talking points. So, this is my personal opinion. Okay, so when it comes to the aid for Ukraine, okay, so why do we have the biggest and best military in the world? Like, why? Like, what's the reality? It's like, who are we worried about? It's like we're worried about Russia and China. We built all these weapon systems. We built this army. We built all this technological capability. Well, why? Cold War. It was to beat the Russians. So now you have the Russians, this nefarious force in the world. You have this evil dictator who's going in and attacking a country he should not be attacking. And our support and financial support. So when people say financial support, they think that we're just shipping over pallets of cash to them. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, we're allowing them to buy weapons from us. So the U.S. government is basically buying weapons from U.S. contractors and shipping the weapons over there. That's one part of it. There's also some other programs and stuff like helping keep the Russian government, the Ukrainian government like up and running.
Sure.
There's some other like things like that I'm not super stoked on. But as far as we're just talking purely weapons, it's like, dude, hell yeah, send them all the weapons you can. Like like America, without having to like lose a soldier, like put boots on ground. Obviously there was guys who volunteered, but actual U.S. troops on the ground. We just like wiped out the Russian army. We just knocked out half of their entire capability without having to fire a shot, because we just gave it to the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians are like, yo, like they're ready to throw hands, and they're gonna, you know, and they're ready to fight. So like we're like, dude, hell yeah, like let's give them the weapons. They're ready to go do it. So
okay, interesting.
Yeah. So I fully support arming the Ukrainians to the teeth, giving them everything that they possibly can. To make sure they hold back the Russians, because that's what these armaments are for. And then most of those dollars actually come back to the United States by they're buying U.S. stuff. And then there's also these trade deals and stuff as well, where we're gonna hopefully get some of that money back with like rare earth mineral deals and drilling rights. Maybe not drilling rights, but like those other rights. And what was the second question?
Well, I'll now I have another question.
Okay.
Which will lead into this question.
Yeah.
The whole, again, maybe it's propaganda, probably. The debate that was caught on camera with Zelensky and Trump, where he asked for more money and more things, and Trump was kind of like, no, you're not getting any more. Mm-hmm. Do you agree or disagree with Trump's stance on that?
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so your first question was the question had been about like, do you think he's too
Trump
friendly with Putin?
Or yeah.
No, Trump is not friendly with Putin. That is, I think, one of the biggest misreads of the situation that's going on. So, and again, this is my opinion. I have no insider information. Trump is a negotiator. And Trump understands when he's looking at a guy like Putin. Putin has an ego, just like Trump does. And so when you're negotiating with somebody and you want to, even if you think they're the bad guy, are you going to be yelling and screaming at him and acting like a fool, like everything just to prove a point? No, you're not. You're going to be sitting there. You're going to smile. You're going to shake hands. And when some reporter asks you a question, well, you condemn every single thing that he's ever done, blah, blah, blah. You're going to go like, Trump's just kind of talking off the cuff. He's like, it's like, you know, because he knows Putin's going to hear that interview or whatever. He knows who's going to go, right. Well, you know, like, both sides are like, killing too much, and we gotta end it. It's all that stuff. And so so then the headline is Trump refuses to condemn Putin's actions. And you're like, no, that's not what's going on.
That's how dumb our interviewers are.
It's so stupid. Yeah. It's so stupid. It's willful ignorance. They want to believe that he's this nefarious force. Yeah. No. So if you look at the actual reality of it, Putin didn't make any moves when Trump was president the first time. He didn't do nothing. Mm. And now that Trump's president the second time, now we're moving closer to an actual peace deal, right? Very close at this point, in theory, right? It could fall apart and, whatever. Mm-hmm. But that's not somebody who's friendly with Putin. That's like somebody who Putin respects and is like, okay, this is a serious player on the world stage. So that's the difference here. So no, I don't think Putin is Putin like Trump just loves Putin, is fine with everything. So Trump's not stupid. He's not stupid. He's playing a negotiating game, and he understands Putin maybe more than other people do,
right? Sure.
Because he sort of understands that ego, because he has that big ego. Right. He understands you need to compliment the guy, you need to be whatever. So then going to the Zelensky question, sure. Sort of the ambush, the angry ambush thing. When I look at that, so I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but like when I look at that looks to me like it might have been planned out a little bit, because JD Vance just jumped in there and was like, hey man, you're ungrateful and all this other stuff. I think what was going on there, if you look at the context of where the negotiations were at the time, Trump was trying to force Zelensky to actually be willing to agree to a ceasefire, to agree to a minerals deal. Sure. He was trying to force him to actually Trump was putting his foot down, because Zelensky was like, no, we're not going to do any land swaps. We're not going to do anything. This is going to go on. We're going to get every single inch of Ukrainian territory back. And Trump and anybody who can see the situation is like, dude, you're not getting it back. So let's move forward. You need to be willing to come to the table with an actual thing. So with an actual deal here, and you have to come first to the table, because Putin's not going to, right? And so when you see a situation like that where they start kind of yelling at him and that whole thing fell apart, there's maybe a little bit of truth to, I think, some of their anger with him. They're like, dude, you haven't said thank you. You're just sitting here demanding that we do stuff. But I think it was more about hey, dude, like humble yourself. You guys are going to lose. You're continuing, like you're going to lose this war without us backing you up. So like calm down. We need to come to the table, and you need to bend here a little bit, or you're going to break.
Right. Why would we keep supporting and funding if you're not going to comply with what we're asking you to do?
Yeah, it's like, what do you want me to do? Like
keep funding your,
we're just going to fund this forever. It's like we don't want Russia to take territory. And so this is where people just intentionally assume the worst because they don't like Trump or they don't like Republicans or whatever. So they'll go like, oh well, you're trying to keep Putin in power. You're trying to keep the war going. Oh, you're against Zelensky. It's like, no, dude. It's like you're having a tough conversation with a wayward son here. Like, hey man, I'm doing this for you. Like you need to buckle up, mister. Like this is bad. People are dying.
Serious.
We got to end this. So that's kind of my read on the situation.
Yeah, I mean that's a good perspective because again, like we are funding who is or what is taking out Russia, good thing, but to an extent, like you can't keep funding if they're not going to bend where we need them to bend type of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're not saying surrender. We're not saying capitulate. And at that point, Zelensky just really wasn't being flexible. And so you gotta lay down the law at some point.
Right. How much progress have you seen as far as Stronghold? Like how big are you guys now? Where are your territories?
Yeah. So I started Stronghold in 2018, after I'd left the military, and self-funded it. So I was just me, buying my own plane tickets over to a place to help out and whatnot. Now we're doing pretty well. We got 7 or 8 full-time employees plus about 25 employees who work in Myanmar, and they run all of our ambulances. So one of the things that's unique about us is every program that we do, every single thing that we do is focused on building up the capability of the locals. Sure. And so the medical evacuations and stuff that we do. So we're not just sending in like a bunch of American guys to go sit at a front line and like treat the wounded. It's like, no, you're going to go there. You're going to train the local medics. We're going to bring in supplies for the local medics. They're going to be doing the treatments. And you're going to be looking over their shoulder while they do it. And then obviously you'll jump in there if you need to as well. So we're in the trenches with them, but it's building up and enabling them to do what they do. And so the way we measure success is what the locals are able to do without us there. That's how we measure that success. So but we're doing very well. We're growing. I'm in town to do some more fundraising and spread awareness about the organization and everything. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, hopefully this podcast can help.
That'd be great.
In your efforts. Yeah. We end every podcast by asking the guests 2 questions. In your entire life, what has been your lowest of your low, and then what has been the highest of your high?
Man, those are great questions. I would say the highest of the high would be, are you talking like professionally or just like in general, life, just in general? Life, I would say meeting and marrying my wife is my high. That's she's I love her to death. She's my best friend. She's my rock. She's my little battle buddy. She's everything to me. And then growing our family, having a daughter is just like, I would say right now I'm going through the phase of the highest of the high with my family. Lowest of the low, man, that's tough because there's so many of them. I will say there was a point when I started Stronghold and it wasn't doing well, because it takes, how it is, like you're starting a business and it's like you're hustling and you're grinding and it's not working. And when you're running a nonprofit, any money that you do bring in is like you're donating to other people. So it's like you aren't even able to take a paycheck for a very long time until the organization gets big enough. And so there was a very low point. I want to say it was mid 2020. I hurt my back. COVID lockdowns. It wasn't so much the COVID stuff. It was just the fact that my back was injured. I was sitting here looking at my life. I've been running this organization for a few years. It's not going anywhere. I'm like living at my parents' house. I sleep on the floor in my parents' house because my back hurts, and I'm just like to this really, really low point where I'm just like, what the hell am I doing? And those are just like really dark times. But then you keep doing it. You figure it out. You keep making progress, and eventually, you dig yourself out of that. So I would say what my lowest point was probably mid 2020, and I'm probably living my highest point right now.
That's awesome, man. A lot of guests, I say it every time, that sit in this chair say that their highest of highs is right around right now. So
wow, that's great.
That's
awesome.
Great. Yeah. I don't think we've ever actually, maybe 1 or 2 guys that have said differently, but everybody's always like, you know what? Right now is a really good time for me.
Have you ever had anybody who's like, right now is the lowest point?
Yeah, actually. And I won't even mention, I won't mention name on the camera, but I've had him on several times.
Okay.
And I've caught him in really, really good highs, and I've caught him in what I would consider and he would admit it, his low.
Oh yeah.
And I felt it in the energy of the room, and he wasn't who he was. And we took time maybe off the camera to like work things through. And I'm not like the reason he's where he is now, of course, but you can feel it. And all you want to do is like support, because looking outside in, that you're going to make it out of that down period for yourself, right? It's easier for me to say than you, but as long as I can kind of help you through that and just like encourage you to know like this isn't going to last forever, that's all I'll do. But yeah, it was a tough podcast because every question I had, well, I don't know, maybe this and that. I mean, fuck, I'm not gonna
like, dude, I need content.
Yeah, like,
man.
come on, man, this is not helping me. But
like, whatever.
Dude, I cannot thank you enough, everyone, for your service and support, and it puts my life in perspective. Like I said off camera, like what I do is so not meaningless in a bad way, but just like your impact on what you're doing for this country and the world is so great. And more people should thank guys like you and girls like you. So hopefully this podcast raises awareness to that. Thank you for being on. Where can they find and support Stronghold if they want to?
Yeah, so people can check us out at strongholdrescue.org. If you become a monthly supporter, we sort of have like a Netflix subscription. Okay. So put your charity on like a Netflix subscription, and we'll send you one of these awesome Stronghold shirts in the mail. So cool. People can check it out at strongholdrescue.org. And then I'm on social media just at Ephraim Mattos.
Ephraim Mattos.
Yeah.
All right, we'll put that link in the description. And again, thank you for coming on today.
Perfect. Thanks, brother.
That's it, everybody. Cheers.